"Christopher, you're a disgrace to this family. Leave, you're not wanted here." Those cutting words pierced through the air, spat by my own father amidst the celebration of my brother Alex's wedding. The humiliation stung deeper as Alex remained silent, a silent accomplice to my expulsion. Anger boiled within me, ready to storm out when a plea for help interrupted my departure. A staff member, desperate in a moment of crisis, sought my aid. In that unexpected turn, my father saw me for who I truly was, and it jolted him. "My name is Christopher, one of two brothers in our family. Growing up, our father, a stern lawyer, favored Alex, leaving me to perpetually chase his shadow. No moment of leisure existed in our lives. Every second was dedicated to lessons and studying. Even the simple joy of playing with friends was a luxury denied. Despite my relentless efforts to meet my father's lofty standards and match Alex's achievements, I perpetually felt inadequate, a constant disappointment to my father. The pivotal moment arrived with the entrance exam for a prestigious school, a futile attempt to win my father's approval. When I inevitably failed, my father's silence towards me solidified, his attention solely on Alex and my mother. Left to navigate the shadows of neglect, I found solace in my mother's unwavering support, but they persisted, exacerbated by Alex's indifference. Determined to forge my own path, I departed silently after high school, leaving only a note for my mother. Striking out on my own, I secured a job at a hotel where I could both work and live. It was there, amidst the bustling corridors and transient guests, that I found the freedom and fulfillment that eluded me at home. I get to focus on what I need to do, Christopher. Another mistake? How many times do I have to tell you? I'm sorry, I'll fix it right away. Get it together, Christopher. Michael, the hotel manager, was relentless in his expectations. As a mere high school graduate thrust into the real world, I constantly found myself on the receiving end of his reprimands. Yet, amidst the criticism, I persisted, striving to prove myself in this unfamiliar terrain. Unlike my father's harshness, Michael's feedback was constructive. His praise, when earned, fueled my determination to excel. A significant moment etched itself into my memory at the dawn of the new year, the busiest time for the hotel. After completing the requisite training, I was entrusted to work independently. That year, the influx of guests seemed greater than ever, stretching our resources to their limits. The chaos of serving dinner guests, either in the bustling dining hall or through room service, reached fever pitch. Despite being a novice, I tackled my duties with fervor, aware that my learning curve came at the expense of the hotel's smooth operation. Then, a minor crisis struck on New Year's Day. A colleague fell ill, leaving us short-staffed. I doubled down on my efforts, pushing myself beyond the mandated hours to keep the hotel afloat. Just when it seemed we had weathered the storm, disaster struck. The kitchen sink's pipe burst amidst the dinner rush, plunging us into chaos. With no plumber available on New Year's Day, the situation grew dire. Michael's frustration mirrored the mounting tension. In a moment of desperation, I stepped forward. "Michael, can I try fixing the plumbing? I'll sort it out." Though met with skepticism, my offer was our only hope. With a hesitant nod, Michael relented, allowing me to take charge. Unbeknownst to many, my time at a science-focused high school had equipped me with a unique set of skills, including rudimentary plumbing knowledge. Drawing on this background, I set to work. Half an hour later, the once flooded kitchen was restored to order, the crisis averted through a combination of determination and unexpected expertise. I had somehow managed to fix the pipe, I announced breathlessly to Michael. He rushed over, turning the faucet with eager anticipation. Water gushed forth, a testament to my makeshift repair. The room erupted in smiles and praise. "Great job, Christopher. You're my pride and joy," Michael declared, his words washing over me with warmth. Growing up under Michael's guidance had been a revelation. Together, we navigated the challenges of New Year's Day at the hotel, emerging victorious. The sense of fulfillment I experienced that day left an indelible mark, shaping the person I am today. 15 years flew by, and I found myself fully immersed in my role at the hotel. Then, one day, a letter arrived from Mom, breaking the silence that had settled between us. It bore news of Alex's impending marriage. Though I had drifted apart from Dad and Alex, Mom's plea for my presence at the wedding tugged at my heartstrings. Reluctantly, I agreed to attend. The venue, a luxurious hotel, mirrored Alex and Dad's penchant for extravagance. As I arrived, clad in a trusty suit, I couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place amidst the elite gathering. Perhaps Alex's bride, a woman of impeccable grace, was a product of Dad's networking or a strategic alliance. In the waiting room, surrounded by faces of high society, I found myself an outsider, observing from the periphery. With no one to engage, I became a silent observer, watching the intricate dance of privilege and power unfold before me. As I locked eyes with two familiar faces, a sense of unease settled within me. His expression was unmistakably displeased. Dad and Alex approached, their presence looming over me. "Why are you here?" Dad's voice, deep and commanding, echoed through the air, stirring memories long buried. "Is it so wrong to celebrate Alex's wedding?" "Oh, by the way, congrats, Alex," I replied, trying to diffuse the tension. Alex's response was muted, his conflicted expression betraying the strain of our family dynamics. "What have you been up to all these years?" "No doubt some worthless job," and his words cut through the air like a knife, his disdain palpable. "Christopher, you shouldn't be here," he continued, his tone dripping with contempt. Mom rushed over, attempting to intercede. "Come on, Christopher is here to celebrate. No need to be so harsh," she pleaded, her desperation evident. But her efforts were futile, drowned out by Dad's unwavering judgment. "Enough, Mom," Dad asserted, his voice a thunderous decree. "Christopher, let me make this clear. You're a disgrace. I don't want you ruining Alex's celebration. Get out." Anger surged within me, fueled by years of neglect and rejection. I hadn't wanted to come to Alex's wedding, and yet I found myself subjected to this humiliation. "Fine, I'm leaving," I declared, my resolve firm. As I turned to exit the waiting room, a voice called out, halting my retreat. A wedding staff member approached, urgency etched on their face. "What's up?" I inquired, curiosity mingling with frustration. "It seems we have an unexpected guest for today's wedding. We're short on seats and food," they explained hurriedly, their concern evident. Everyone in the waiting room looks worried. Emily, the planner, and the parents-in-law staff, their faces etched with concern, awaited a solution. Caught between indignation and duty, I hesitated, uncertain of my next move. "I see. Is that what's going on? Emily can't handle it alone, and they're asking for my help. But what does this have to do with me?" I pondered, a torrent of grievances against Dad and Alex swirling within me. Yet amidst the resentment, memories from the past surfaced, softening my resolve. Recollections of Alex's kindness flooded my mind, the times he made space for play during our study breaks. If I walked away now, I'd be no better than Dad. With a determined sigh, I turned back to the wedding staff. "Can you take me to Emily?" I requested, a flicker of resolve in my voice. The staff member's face softened, and I followed them back into the waiting room, reclaiming the ground from which I had been expelled moments before. In the center of the room, Emily, Dad, and the bride's father wore expressions of concern. As I approached, Dad's eyes locked with mine, his demeanor bristling with hostility. "Why has Christopher returned?" he demanded, his tone sharp. Before he could escalate the confrontation, Emily intervened. "General Manager, please help us," she implored, her urgency palpable. Dad's shock was evident as I calmly revealed my position as the general manager of the hotel chain. Since joining the company during its nascent stages, we had expanded to hotels and wedding venues nationwide. The very hotel we stood in was under my oversight. "I think I can handle this," I assured them, dismissing Dad's protests with a wave of my hand. "Dad, I'm busy right now. We'll talk later." With a sense of purpose, I turned to Emily. "Relax, Emily. Get the seats and everything else ready. I'll take care of the food," I directed, watching as the tension ebbed from her features. "Understood. I'll leave the food to the general manager and handle the rest," she affirmed before rushing off to execute the plan. With all eyes on me, I exited the room and sought out my friend, Chef Jackson. "Hey, you in?" I called out as he emerged from the kitchen. "Christopher, what brings you here?" he inquired, his curiosity piqued. "I'm here as a guest today. My brother's wedding is happening here, but we're one meal short. Can you help?" I asked Chef Jackson, hoping for a quick fix. "Sure thing. I'll whip something up with my culinary skills," he replied confidently. "Much appreciated. I owe you dinner. Looking forward to it," I replied gratefully. After handling a few loose ends, I returned to the waiting room. The guests had already moved to the ceremony area, leaving only my parents and the bride's parents behind. As I announced the issue was resolved, relief washed over the room. "We've got an extra meal coming," I explained, seeing the tension ease from my mom's and the bride's parents' faces. My dad, however, remained conflicted, his pride evident. Christopher, thank you so much. Because of you, the celebration can go on successfully, my dad acknowledged, his gratitude genuine. It's all in a day's work as a general manager, I replied with a smile, leading the way into the ceremony hall. As the lights dimmed and the groom and bride made their entrance, I couldn't help but marvel at their radiant presence. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, and as mealtime arrived, I ensured everyone was served before finally exhaling a sigh of relief. With the ceremony concluded, I engaged in a heartfelt conversation with both families, sharing their gratitude towards me, especially from the bride's family, who thanked me profusely. These moments are why I love my job, I admitted sincerely as their expressions of gratitude warmed my heart. Christopher, thank you so much. We had the best day ever, all thanks to you, they expressed with genuine appreciation. No worries, wishing you all the happiness in the world. Thank you so much, I replied warmly before turning to face my dad and Alex. Christopher, you did wonderfully. Thank you, my mom praised, her words filled with pride. Dad and Alex wanted to speak with me. As Alex apologized first, expressing gratitude for my assistance, I couldn't help but smile. As long as I could help, Alex, it's all good, I reassured him before turning to Dad, who remained silent. With a sense of closure, I accepted their gratitude, knowing that despite our differences, we could find common ground. Just then, my cell phone buzzed, signaling more work awaiting me at the hotel in the next town over. Looks like more work, but hey, I enjoy it, so no complaints. Alright, I'm off. Got work to do. You two take care. I bid farewell, ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead. It was a realization settling in. I probably wouldn't see Alex or Dad again. With that thought lingering, I left the room without a backward glance, my steps leading me back to work. 3 days post Alex's wedding, I relished a rare day off, reclining on the sofa with a steaming cup of coffee, my moment of bliss abruptly interrupted by the doorbell's chime. Curious as to the visitor's identity, I made my way to the door, only to be met with Alex's unexpected presence. Alex, what brings you here? I inquired, surprised by his appearance. Sorry, I got your address from Mom. Wanted to talk to you, Christopher, Alex explained, his tone tentative. I welcomed him in, brushing off any concerns about the tidiness of my home. As I poured him a cup of coffee, Alex expressed gratitude, taking a slow sip. Thank you. Smells good, he remarked, attempting a smile. As we settled into conversation, Alex's demeanor shifted, his gaze unwavering as he broached the topic at hand. The next moment he apologized, I recalled, puzzled by his sudden change in tone. I'm really sorry for everything, he admitted, catching me off guard. Initially taken aback by his unexpected apology, I struggled to comprehend his motive for making the trip in person. Hey, it's alright, Alex, I reassured him, attempting to alleviate any tension. But Alex wasn't done yet. With a sense of vulnerability, he began to share his innermost thoughts and feelings. You might think I'm the older brother who can do anything, but I envy you, Christopher, he confessed, his words striking a chord. Silence enveloped the room as Alex's confession hung in the air, leaving me at a loss for words. His admission took me by surprise, shattering preconceived notions and revealing a side of him I had never seen. I had no idea you felt that way, Alex, I admitted, a twinge of guilt gnawing at me as I processed his revelation. That's just it. It's not your fault, Christopher, Alex reassured me, his weak smile betraying a depth of emotion. In that moment, a sense of understanding washed over me, bridging the gap between us. Alex, I'm sorry. I never considered that you were struggling too, I confess, my own remorse surfacing. My brother's smile, though faint, spoke volumes. That's just it. It's not your fault, Christopher, he reassured me, his words echoing in the quiet room. With a newfound sense of empathy and connection, we found the words to express what had long been left unsaid, strengthening the bond between us. I think you've been through struggles I can't even imagine. I truly admire that, but I also want you to know about me, I confessed to Alex, feeling the weight of my words as they hung in the air. Taking a deep breath, I paused, gathering my thoughts before continuing. Alex listened intently, his silence encouraging me to share more. Breaking away from our parents and becoming independent wasn't easy either. The beginning was really tough, I admitted, recognizing the parallel struggles we both faced. It's true, We both have our share of hardships, Alex acknowledged, his response genuine. It was clear that he had more to say, but I found myself at a loss for words, unsure of how to offer guidance or reassurance. Unable to conjure up wise counsel, I spoke from the heart. To be honest, I think you should do what you really want to do, Alex, without worrying about Dad, I suggested, hoping to offer him some semblance of clarity amidst his inner turmoil. As Alex absorbed my words, a sense of relief washed over him. You're right, Christopher. You've helped clear up my inner turmoil. Thank you, he expressed, gratitude evident in his tone. No, thank you, Alex, for coming over, I replied sincerely, accompanying him to the door as he departed with a promise to return for coffee. A month later, a letter arrived from Alex, detailing his decision to leave behind his career as a lawyer in pursuit of his passion for glass craftsmanship. Despite facing disapproval from Dad, Alex found solace in the support of his wife and newfound motivation in his chosen path. As I reflected on Alex's journey and our evolving family dynamics, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the bond between siblings. Lost in thought, the sound of my mobile phone's alarm jolted me back to reality, signaling the start of another day on the path I had chosen, in the job I had embraced.
It was just another shift at the hospital. My name's Eliza Bennett, a 40-year-old ER nurse who's seen it all. I like my job, even though it's tough sometimes. The hospital's short on specialists, so I often pull double duty, working in the ER and wherever else I'm needed. Tonight, I was in the ER, same as always. My husband, Michael? Well, he's been busy building his political career, working as an assistant to the mayor. We don't talk much about my work. He's not too interested. We've been living our separate lives under the same roof, each absorbed in our own worlds. We never had kids. I wanted them for a long time, but it just didn't happen. Eventually, Michael told me he was fine without children. He said he liked the quiet, so it's just been the two of us, living in a kind of silent agreement. The ER was buzzing with the usual chaos, nurses and doctors rushing around, the constant beeping of machines. I was checking on a patient when I heard the ambulance siren. It was a call from a residential area, something about a sick baby. I've always had a soft spot for kids, so I volunteered to go. My colleague, John, was driving the ambulance. He's a good guy, always has a joker ready to lighten the mood. We've worked together for years. Ready for another adventure, Elisa? John asked as we hopped into the ambulance. Always, I replied with a half smile. We chatted about trivial things on the way, the weather, a new restaurant in town. It was a way to keep the tension at bay, to stay calm before facing whatever awaited us. The address led us to a fancy neighborhood, the kind where each house looked like it could be on a postcard. John whistled as we pulled up to a large, well-lit house. Someone's doing well for themselves, he commented. I just nodded, grabbing my medical bag. We were met at the door by a young woman, probably in her early 20s. She was holding a baby, and I could see the worry etched on her face. Please, help my baby. He's got a fever, and he won't stop crying, she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. Let's take a look, I said, trying to sound reassuring. Her mother, an older woman with kind eyes, stood by her side. I could see where the young woman got her looks. They led us into a spacious living room where I began examining the baby. I didn't know it then, but that night was going to change everything. My ordinary life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. As I examined the baby, I could tell something was wrong. He was burning up with fever and seemed to be having spasms. I needed to act fast. John, we need to cool him down now, I said urgently. John nodded, quickly understanding the situation. Got it, Eliza. I'll get some ice packs and a cool cloth. While John fetched the supplies, I turned to the young woman. I'm Eliza. What's your baby's name? She was on the verge of tears. His name is Liam. He was fine this afternoon, and then suddenly, it's okay, I said gently. We're going to take care of Liam. John came back with the ice packs and a cloth. We worked together, trying to bring down Liam's fever. The young woman, who I learned was named Sophia, and her mother watched us, anxiety written all over their faces. "Is he going to be okay?" Sophia's mother asked. She was trying to stay strong, but I could hear the worry in her voice. "We're doing everything we can," I assured her. After a few tense minutes, Liam's fever started to come down. He stopped convulsing and began to calm. Relief washed over Sophia's face. "Thank you," she whispered. "We should still get him to a hospital to be checked over," I suggested. "Better safe than sorry." Sophia nodded. "Of course, whatever he needs." As we prepared to move Liam, the front door opened. I didn't pay it much attention until I heard a familiar voice. "What's going on here? Sophia, are you okay?" I froze. That voice. I'd know it anywhere. It was Michael, my husband. I turned slowly, and there he was, standing in the doorway. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "Eliza, what are you doing here?" Michael's voice was a mix of surprise and something else. Fear, maybe. "I could ask you the same question," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Sophia looked from Michael to me and back again. "You two know each other?" Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Eliza is my wife," he finally managed to say. I confirmed, "Yes, I am his wife." The room went silent. Sophia's eyes widened, and her mother let out a gasp. I could feel John's eyes on me, full of questions. "Your wife?" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. She looked at Michael, hurt and confusion written all over her face. Michael didn't answer. He just stood there, looking like he wished the ground would swallow him up. In that moment, I realized my ordinary life was over. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The room was thick with tension. I couldn't believe Michael was here, in this house, with Sophia and her baby. I felt like I was in some kind of bad dream. Sophia was the first to break the silence. "Michael, why is she calling you her husband?" Michael finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sophia, I can explain." "Explain?" Sophia's voice rose. "Explain why my baby's nurse is claiming to be your wife." I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my response. I took a deep breath. "Because I am his wife. We've been married for 10 years. Sophia's face crumpled. "But you told me you were divorced." Michael ran a hand through his hair, looking desperate. "I know, and I'm sorry. I was going to tell you, You just what?" Sophia's mother cut in, her voice sharp. "Lied to my daughter, to us." John, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Maybe we should give you some space to talk this out." I nodded, grateful for his intervention. "Yes, we should go. Liam's stable, but he still needs to be seen at the hospital." As John and I started to move Liam's carrier, the front door opened again. Another surprise. This time, an older man walked in. I recognized him immediately. Mayor Thomas Harrington, Michael's boss. "What's all this commotion?" the mayor asked, looking around the room. Sophia rushed to him. "Dad, this is complicated." The mayor's eyes landed on Michael. "Michael, what's going on?" Before Michael could respond, Sophia blurted out, "Michael's married, Dad, and he lied to me about it." The mayor's expression turned from confusion to anger. "Married? Is this true, Michael?" Michael nodded, unable to meet the mayor's gaze. "Yes, sir, it's true." I could see the wheels turning in the mayor's head. "And you're his wife?" he asked, looking at me. "Yes, I am," I confirmed. The mayor shook his head. "I can't believe this. Michael, you've been working for me for over a year, and I had no idea." Michael tried to say something, but the mayor held up a hand to stop him. "Save it. I need some time to process this." Sophia was crying now, her mother comforting her. The mayor looked at his daughter and granddaughter with a mixture of sadness and anger. I felt like I was watching everything from a distance. This was my life falling apart, but it felt like a scene from a TV show. As John and I finally left the house with Liam, I couldn't help but glance back. Michael was standing there looking lost. Part of me felt sorry for him, but another part of me was angry, so very angry. I had no idea what was going to happen next. All I knew was that my ordinary life was gone, replaced by something much messier and more complicated. After dropping Liam off at the hospital and making sure he was in good hands, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. I needed answers. I needed to talk to Michael. I drove home, my mind racing. When I got there, Michael's car was in the driveway. I took a deep breath and went inside. Michael was sitting at the kitchen table, looking like he hadn't moved since he got home. He looked up when I came in, his expression a mix of guilt and fear. "Eliza, He started, but trailed off. I sat down across from him. "I want to know everything, Michael. How long has this been going on? Why did you lie to her? To me?" Michael took a deep breath. "It started a year ago, at a work event. I met Sophia and we hit it off. I know I should have told her the truth, but I saw an opportunity." Opportunity? I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. With her being the mayor's daughter, I thought... He paused, struggling to find the words. I thought it could help my career. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. So, our marriage, our life together, it meant nothing to you? It's not like that, Eliza. I do care about you, but I felt stuck. I thought I needed more. And a baby. Did you plan that too? My voice was rising now, anger mixing with the hurt. No, that was an accident. But when Sophia told me, I thought maybe it could all work out. I could have this new life. A new life? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And what about our life? What about me? Michael looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I don't know. I thought maybe we could get a divorce, and it would be better for both of us. So, you were just going to leave me? After 10 years? I was going to talk to you about it. I just needed to figure things out first. I shook my head, feeling a mix of sadness and disbelief. You were going to leave me and marry her, weren't you? Michael didn't answer, but he didn't need to. I knew the truth. I can't believe this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't believe you would do this to me. I'm sorry, Eliza. I never meant to hurt you. Sorry doesn't fix this, Michael. You've lied to me, to Sophia, to everyone, and now everything's falling apart. Michael looked like he wanted to say more, but I stood up. I need some time to think, to figure out what I'm going to do. As I walked away, I could feel Michael's eyes on me, but I didn't look back. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but one thing was clear. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The next few days were a blur. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere. Michael tried to talk to me, but I couldn't deal with it. Not yet. Then, one evening, I found myself at Sophia's doorstep. I needed to talk to her, to understand her side of the story. I rang the bell, and after a moment, she opened the door. Eliza? Sophia looked surprised to see me. I think we need to talk, I said. She hesitated, but then nodded, stepping aside to let me in. We sat down in her living room, an awkward silence hanging in the air. Why are you here? Sophia finally asked. I want to understand. What did Michael tell you about us? Sophia took a deep breath. He said he was divorced, that he'd been single for a while. I had no idea about you until you showed up that night. I nodded, feeling a pang of sadness. And the baby? Liam? She looked down, tears welling in her eyes. He was a surprise. Michael said we could be a family, that he wanted to be there for us. I believed him. I could hear the pain in her voice, and despite everything, I felt sorry for her. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm sorry he lied to both of us." She wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry too. I never wanted to be part of something like this." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. "Did you love him?" I asked, not sure if I wanted to know the answer. Sophia looked up, her expression sad. "I thought I did. But now, I don't know what to believe. He lied about everything." I nodded, understanding all too well. "Yeah, I get that." We talked for a while longer, sharing our stories, our confusion, our pain. It was strange, talking like this with the other woman, but it was also comforting in a way. When I left, I felt a little lighter, like I'd let go of some of the anger and hurt. It wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but it was a start. As I drove home, I thought about Michael, about our marriage, about everything that had happened. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay in limbo forever. I needed to make a decision, for my sake and for my future. The weeks following the revelation of Michael's betrayal felt like a stormy sea, each day tossing me between waves of anger, disbelief, and an unexpected sense of liberation. As I braced myself for the legal battles ahead, the reality of the situation became crystal clear. It was me and Mayor Harrington versus Michael. The day of the trial dawned like any other, but with a weight that felt like a heavy cloud hanging over me. Walking into the courtroom, I was a mix of nerves and determination. Mayor Harrington gave me a nod of solidarity as we took our seats. The courtroom buzzed with the quiet chatter of spectators and the shuffling of papers. When Michael walked in, escorted by his lawyer, my heart raced. He avoided eye contact, but I could feel the tension between us. The trial began with the mayor's case. His lawyer presented evidence of Michael's deception, how he had lied about being divorced and manipulated Sophia, the mayor's daughter. Photographs, texts, and emails painted a clear picture of Michael's duplicity. Mayor Harrington himself took the stand, his disappointment and anger toward Michael evident in his testimony. Sophia also testified, her voice trembling as she recounted the lies Michael had fed her. Then, it was my turn. My lawyer laid out the case against Michael, highlighting his infidelity and deceit. I took the stand, my hands shaking slightly. The lawyer asked me to recount how I discovered Michael's affair and the events that followed. "As a nurse, I am trained to stay calm in emergencies," I began, my voice steady. But nothing could have prepared me for the shock of finding my husband with another woman and a child he had kept hidden from me. The courtroom was silent, hanging on my every word. I spoke about our marriage, the struggles, and how Michael's ambition had slowly overshadowed our relationship. When it was Michael's turn, his defense seemed weak. His lawyer tried to downplay the situation, suggesting misunderstandings and miscommunications. But the evidence was overwhelming. Michael himself stumbled through his testimony, his excuses sounding hollow and insincere. As the trial proceeded, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. For years, I had lived in the shadow of Michael's ambitions, but here, in this courtroom, I was reclaiming my life. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. Michael was found guilty of fraud and deceit in both cases. There was a murmur in the courtroom, a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. As we exited the courtroom, reporters swarmed around, but I declined to comment. This victory was not about public attention. It was personal, a step towards healing and moving on. Driving home, the weight of the past weeks began to lift. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope. The trial had not just been about legal justice, it was a journey to self-discovery and reclaiming the narrative of my own life. That evening, as I sat quietly at home, I realized the trial was more than a closure. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I was not just a spectator in my life, but the author of my own story. The trial was over, but its ripples were still felt in every corner of my life. The legal victory was clear, but the emotional landscape was more complicated. I had won, but at what cost? The weeks following the trial were a blur. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the routine of my shifts at the hospital. It was during one of these shifts that I ran into Sophia, the mayor's daughter, in the hospital corridor. "Hey," she said quietly, her eyes reflecting a shared understanding of pain and betrayal. "Hi, Sophia," I replied. "How are you holding up?" "It's been tough," she admitted, cradling her baby in her arms. "But I'm managing. And you?" "Day by day," I said, offering a small smile. "Taking it day by day." We exchanged a few more words before parting ways, a silent acknowledgement of the strange bond that now linked us. Back at home, the loneliness of the empty house sometimes felt overwhelming. I had grown used to Michael's absence, but the finality of the divorce brought a new kind of solitude. It was during these quiet moments that I would often find myself reflecting on the past, on the choices I had made, and the ones that had been made for me. One evening, as I was sorting through old papers, I came across an envelope addressed to me. It was from Michael. My first instinct was to throw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. As I read his letter, his words of apology and explanation felt empty. He talked about his mistakes, his regrets, and his desire to make things right. But it was too little, too late. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash, feeling a surge of anger, and then, surprisingly, a sense of release. Michael was part of my past, but he would not define my future. A few days later, I received a call from Mayor Harrington. He wanted to meet for coffee, to thank me personally for my courage during the trial. Sitting across from him in the small cafe, I felt a sense of respect for the man who had stood by his daughter and supported me through the legal ordeal. "Thank you for meeting me, Eliza," he said, his voice sincere. "Your strength during the trial was admirable." "I did what I had to do," I replied, stirring my coffee, "for myself and for Sophia. I want you to know that the City Council is here to support you," he continued. "If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to reach out." I nodded, appreciative of his offer, but determined to stand on my own 2 feet. As I walked back home, I realized that the aftermath of the trial was not just about picking up the pieces, it was about building something new. My marriage to Michael had ended, but my life was still very much in progress. In the following weeks, I made a conscious decision to focus on myself. I reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and even began considering furthering my education in nursing. The journey was not easy. There were days of doubt and moments of loneliness. But there was also a newfound sense of freedom and possibility. I was no longer tied to Mikhail's ambitions or his betrayals. I was my own person, with my own path to forge. As I look back on that tumultuous time, I realize that the aftermath was not just about recovering from a betrayal. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I wanted out of life. It was about learning to stand alone, not as a victim, but as a survivor, ready to face whatever the future might hold.
Life's funny, isn't it? One minute you're on top of the world, the next, it's crumbling beneath your feet. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This story begins in the warm glow of happiness. My name's Emily, and not too long ago, my biggest problem was deciding what to cook for dinner or what movie to watch on a lazy Sunday afternoon. James and I met in what you might call the old-fashioned way, at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was the guy flipping burgers and telling stories, making everyone laugh. I remember thinking, who is this guy? With his easy smile and a way of looking at me like I was the only one there. It didn't take long for us to become an us. "Emily, you have to try my special burger," he'd said, handing me a plate with a confidence that made me smile. "It's got a secret sauce that'll change your life." I laughed, rolling my eyes. "Change my life, huh? That's a pretty big claim for a burger. But I'll admit, it was a darn good burger. Maybe not life-changing, but it definitely made that day memorable. Not long after, James met Grandma. She was everything to me, the one who raised me when my own parents couldn't. The way he talked to her, with respect and a bit of playful banter, it won her over in a heartbeat. "I like him," she whispered to me as he went to grab us some lemonade. "He's genuine, and he's got kind eyes. You hold on to this one, Emily." And hold on, I did. We got married in a small ceremony, just family and close friends. The house I moved into was full of memories. The walls echoed with laughter from a time when my parents were still alive. James and I started filling it with new memories of our own, and it felt like life was just right. I got pregnant about a year into the marriage. When I told James, the look on his face was something I thought I'd remember forever with warmth in my heart. His joy seemed to match mine, filling up the room until it was almost bursting. "We're going to have a baby, Em," he said, lifting me up and spinning me around. "A little one of our own, can you believe it?" "I can," I whispered back, "because it's happening with you." They say bad news never has good timing. The day I lost Grandma was a cold slap of reality, a reminder that life doesn't play fair. Grandma was more than family. She was my confidant, my cheerleader, my safe place. Losing her felt like being adrift at sea without a compass. I remember sitting on the sofa, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, numb. James came to me, his face a mask of concern. "Em, talk to me," he urged, his voice gentle. "What's there to talk about?" I muttered, staring at the tea, watching as it lost its steam, its warmth, its life, kind of like how I felt inside. "We'll get through this together. You're not alone," he said, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. But his words, meant to comfort, felt distant, like a radio playing softly in the background, familiar yet easy to tune out. Then, as if I hadn't already been robbed of enough, our baby slipped away before I ever got to hold them, to tell them how much I loved them, to promise them the world. The miscarriage was like a physical blow, one that knocked the wind out of me and left me gasping for air, for answers, for comfort that wouldn't come. James was there, yes, always there, but somehow not really. "Emily, we can try for another baby when you're ready," he said one night as we lay in the darkness, his voice void of the pain I felt. I turned to him, a part of me desperate to find the husband who had once spun me around in joy. "I don't want another baby, James. I wanted this one. Our baby." The words were a whisper, but they might as well have been screams for how they echoed in the silence. "We'll make it through this," he said. But his assurance sounded hollow, like a promise made out of obligation rather than desire. I sought refuge in solitude, in the quiet of the house filled with too many ghosts of what could have been. Days melded into nights, and I lost track of time. I lost track of myself. James tried, in his way. "Let's go out, see people. It might help," he suggested one day, his hand resting lightly on the back of the chair I was slumped in. I shook my head, my eyes fixed on a crack in the wall, a blemish I hadn't noticed before. "I can't face the world, James. Not yet. The world is where the pain is." "Emily, staying cooped up in here won't change what happened," he pressed, but I barely heard him. How could I tell him that the world outside these walls reminded me of everything I had lost? That every street corner, every shop window, every smiling face was a reminder of a happiness that felt like it had been stolen from me? The funeral was a blur. People came, they said things, they left. I nodded, I shook hands, I accepted condolences. But nothing got through. I was in a bubble, watching life happen around me, a life I no longer felt a part of. James was there, of course, but his presence felt more like a shadow than a source of warmth. "You're so strong, Emily," he told me after the service, his hand finding mine. I wanted to pull away, to scream that I wasn't strong, that I was broken. Instead, I just nodded. What was the point in correcting him? The truth seemed too heavy to share, even with him. As days turned into weeks, I felt James pulling away. Maybe he was tired of dealing with someone who seemed to have given up on life. Maybe he just didn't know how to help me. Maybe he needed an escape from the suffocating sadness that had enveloped our home. "I'm here for you, Em, but you need to start being here too," he said one evening, his patience wearing thin. "Here?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know where here is anymore, James." He sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I mean, you need to start living again, for your sake and mine." I looked up at him then, really looked at him, and saw the strain in his eyes. I knew he was struggling too, in his own way, but the gulf between us had grown too wide, too deep to cross with mere words. That's when the creeping thought began to take root. Maybe I was alone in this after all. James was there, but not really. Not in the way I needed him to be. As the days rolled into weeks and then months, the chasm between James and me grew wider. The man who had once seemed like my anchor was becoming more and more like a stranger, coming home late and sometimes not at all. It gnawed at me, this feeling of him slipping away. I remember one evening, the clock ticking past midnight and the other side of the bed still cold and untouched. When he finally came through the door, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Where have you been, James? Do you know what time it is?" My voice was shaky but firm. He looked tired, his eyes avoiding mine. "Work's been a nightmare. You know how it is." His voice was flat, dismissive almost. "No, I don't know," I snapped back, "because you never talk to me about it anymore. You never talk to me about anything." He let out a long sigh and began to take off his jacket. "Em, we've been through this. Work is work. It's stressful, and I don't want to burden you with it." "But I want to share that burden, James. I thought that's what we did," I said, the last of my words trailing off into a whisper. He paused and finally sat down on the edge of the bed, looking at me. "I know, and I appreciate it, but you have enough on your plate." "Enough on my plate?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean dealing with the loss and trying to piece myself back together? Do you think ignoring me helps with that?" "That's not what I'm doing," he protested. But even as he said it, it sounded like he didn't believe it himself. "I offered you a divorce, James," I reminded him, my voice breaking a little. "I told you that you didn't have to stay with me out of pity or obligation." He looked up sharply at that. "Is that what you think this is? Pity? Obligation?" There was a hint of the old fire in his voice, a glimmer of the man I knew. "Yes, that's what it feels like," I admitted. "You're here, but you're not with me, not really, and it hurts." He ran his hands through his hair, a sure sign he was stressed. "Em, I'm trying. I really am, but I can't just switch off from work. It's been really tough." "But it's more than work, isn't it? You're away even when you're here. You've got your phone on you all the time, always texting, always distracted." He didn't say anything to that, just stared at the floor. "Is there someone else?" The question hung in the air, heavy and frightening. "Em, don't be ridiculous," he said quickly, but his eyes told a different story. I felt a coldness spread through me. This was not the man I married, the one who would look me in the eyes and tell me the truth, no matter how hard. "I need you to be honest with me, James. Please," I implored, my hands clasping and unclasping in my lap. He was silent for a long moment, and then, "There's no one else. It's just work. You've got to believe me." I wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to believe him. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and once that happens, things can never go back to how they were. In the weeks that followed, I watched James like a detective. I noticed how his phone was always face down, how he'd step out of the room to take calls. The signs were there, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. It was a Wednesday when my world finally started to crumble. I answered a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Emily Stanton?" The voice was male, gruff, and not one I knew. "Yes, who's this?" The man paused and then, "We need to talk about your husband." My heart sank. "What about him?" "I think you'd better sit down, Mrs. Stanton." The cafe was one of those nondescript places, sandwiched between a laundromat and a closed-down bookstore. It seemed like a fitting backdrop for what was to come. I sat there, stirring my coffee, each second stretching out like an eternity until the man showed up. He was a large man, with a look that didn't invite many questions. He sat across from me, his hands clasped together, a folder sitting like a barrier between us. "Mrs. Stanton, I'm sorry for the mystery, but I thought it was best we talk in person," he started, his voice serious. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. He nodded as if he expected the question. "My name's Mike Sanders, and I believe we have a common problem. Your husband, James." I swallowed hard. "What about him?" Mike opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. It was James with a woman I'd never seen before. They were laughing, close, too close. "That's my wife," Mike said, tapping the picture. I felt a strange detachment looking at it. "What do they have to do with each other?" "They work together, and they're having an affair," he said bluntly. I looked up, meeting his gaze. "That's impossible. James would never..." He reached back into the folder and took out a handful of printed messages, placing them in front of me. "These are just from the past week." I read them, each word a tiny dagger. There were plans to meet up, pet names, and talk of the future. A future without me, without us. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice a ghost of itself. "Because I thought you should know, and because I want to end it. I thought maybe you would want that too." I stared at the evidence, my mind racing, but my heart already knew the truth. "He told me he loved me. He promised he'd never leave." "People lie, Mrs. Stanton, and they're good at it," Mike said, his voice bitter. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. He was all I had. Mike leaned forward. "You got a choice here. You can pretend this never happened, go on with your life. Or you can confront him, make him face what he's done." "And what about you?" I asked. He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "I'm going to divorce her. She can have him if she wants. I just want out." My hands were shaking as I gathered the papers, folding them with care I didn't feel. "What are you going to do?" Mike asked. The answer surprised even me. "I'm going to fight back." Mike nodded. "Good. If you need anything, evidence, support, you let me know." "Thank you," I said. But as I stood up, I felt anything but thankful. My life as I knew it was over, and it was time for me to figure out what came next. That day, the sun hung low, a glaring eye that seemed to watch over the unfolding scene with indifference. I was waiting on the porch when James's car pulled up. His step was light, too light for a man coming home to a crumbling marriage. He caught the look on my face as he approached. "What's with the gloom?" he asked casually, as if my scowl was just another part of an ordinary day. I held up one of the photos silently. His eyes flicked to it, and his smile faltered, but only for a second. "Oh, that," he chuckled. "I see you've met my other woman." I felt a hollow laugh bubble up from my throat. "Is that all you can say?" "Oh, that?" He folded his arms and leaned against the porch railing. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? That it was a mistake? Because it wasn't. I'm not sorry, and it was no mistake." "Why, James?" I demanded, my hands clenching the photo so tightly the edges crumpled. He laughed, a cold, heartless sound. "You were convenient, you know? A nice house, a decent bit of savings, and when your grandmother passed, well, that was just icing on the cake." I recoiled as if he'd struck me. "You think my grandmother's death was a financial gain?" "Why else would I stick around?" He shrugged. "Especially after... you know." He paused, eyeing me with a cruelty I hadn't seen before. "After the kid." I shook my head in disbelief. "And you hoped what? That I'd off myself in grief?" "Would have made things simpler," he quipped. His words were like acid, burning through the last vestiges of the life I thought I knew. "You're vile," I hissed. "You always were too sensitive, too stupid to see what was right in front of you." He continued mercilessly. "You thought I would end my life?" I asked, the reality of his betrayal sinking in, a cold weight in my stomach. "It would have been a win-win. You'd escape your pathetic little life, and I'd be free with a nice little nest egg." His grin was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen. I couldn't hold back the tears, but I was damned if I'd let him see them fall. "And now? What's your grand plan now?" "Now?" He laughed again, stepping closer. "Now, I guess I'll have to settle for a divorce. You'll probably screw me over on that, won't you? Drag it out. Make me suffer. You don't deserve quick and easy, I managed to say, my voice surprisingly even. His expression soured. You're an ugly, stupid woman, you know that? I don't know what I was thinking, marrying you. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and I felt something shift inside me. The man I had loved was a ghost, a fiction. In his place stood a stranger with a heart full of venom. Get off my porch, James, I said quietly. He smirked, taking a step back. Gladly. This place was never really my style anyway. The courthouse was a place where I thought I'd celebrate our milestones. Instead, I walked up its steps to dissolve the very foundation of my marriage. Mike was right beside me, his presence a silent support. I had the papers in my hand, feeling the weight of every word that testified against James. Mike carried his own set of damning evidence, a mirror to my betrayal. Our steps echoed in the empty hallway, a march towards a verdict we both needed. Inside the courtroom, the air was stale, heavy with the burden of judgments past. James and his mistress, Mike's wife, were already there, a tableau of guilt. Mrs. Stanton? The clerk called out. I stepped forward, handing over the sheaf of papers that detailed every misstep of my husband's affair. The judge surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on me, then on Mike. You have evidence to present? I nodded, my throat tight. Yes, Your Honor. The evidence was laid bare for the court to see. Photographs that spoke 1,000 words of betrayal, texts and call logs that wove a narrative of deceit. I didn't look at James. I didn't need to see his face to remember his lies. And how do you plead? The judge asked, turning to James and his co-defendant. Their answers were a soft murmur of legalese. No contest. The judge took his time, reviewing the evidence, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice the gavel that shattered the last tie between James and me. In light of the uncontested evidence, I am granting the petition for divorce. The division of assets will proceed as outlined, and given the circumstances, Mr. Stanton, you will also pay restitution. James stood, his face ashen, but I felt nothing. No victory, no joy, just the hollow end of a chapter. Mike met my gaze, a silent question in his eyes. Had it been worth it? I could only nod. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about setting the record straight, about reclaiming my dignity from the ruins James had left behind. The courtroom's heavy door swung closed behind me with a sound that felt final. Mike and I found a quiet corner in the bustling hallway outside. So, it's done, Mike said, his voice a mix of relief and something else, maybe sadness. I nodded, the reality of the situation settling in. It's done. They didn't even put up a fight, did they? No, he sighed, looking down at the floor. They knew there was no point. I thought about James, about the love I thought we shared, and how it had all been a lie. Do you think they're sorry for what they did, or just sorry they got caught? Mike's gaze met mine, steady and sure. Does it matter? They're out of our lives now. That's what counts. I let out a long breath, one I'd been holding since the day I got that call. I guess you're right. I didn't want it to end this way. Nobody ever does, he said. But you stood up for yourself. That counts for a lot. The weight of the papers in my bag seemed lighter now. Justice, or something like it, had been served. It didn't undo the past, but it cleared the path for the future. I just want to move on, I admitted. And you will, Mike assured me. This is a fresh start for both of us. I managed a small smile. A fresh start, I echoed. We walked to the exit, the light from the doors growing brighter as we approached. Outside, the sun was shining, and the world moved on, indifferent to the small dramas unfolding in its midst. Emily, Mike said as we stepped into the daylight, what will you do first? I thought for a moment. I'm going to go home, take a long bath, and then I'm going to start planning my future, one step at a time. That sounds perfect, he said. And if you ever need a friend, you know where to find me. I looked at him, grateful for his unexpected friendship. Thank you, Mike, for everything. The days following the divorce were quiet. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some of Grandma's old things, the doorbell rang. I hesitated for a moment, half expecting the past to be on my doorstep, but it was just Sarah, my neighbor. "Hey, Emily," she greeted me with a warm, if somewhat pitying smile. "I heard about everything. I'm so sorry. I brought you some casserole. I figured you might not feel like cooking." I managed a small laugh. "You figured right. Thanks, Sarah." We settled in the kitchen, the casserole warming in the oven, filling the room with a homely scent. "So, what will you do now?" Sarah asked, sipping on the tea I'd made for us. "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but I'm thinking of selling the house. There are too many memories here. I need a fresh start." "That sounds like a good idea," she said. "A new place, new memories." "Yeah," I mused, gazing out of the kitchen window. "I want to travel too, see the places Grandma and I always talked about." "That's wonderful, Emily. It's what you deserve," Sarah encouraged. I smiled, feeling a flicker of excitement at the thought. "It is, isn't it? I spent so long living for someone else, trying to be what James wanted. It's time I lived for myself." Sarah reached across the table, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this. And who knows, maybe along the way, you'll find someone who loves you for you." "I hope so. But for now, I'm okay with being by myself," I said, feeling a strength within me that I hadn't felt in years. "You're stronger than you know, Emily. And this fresh start is just the beginning for you," Sarah said with a knowing nod. The timer on the oven dinged then, breaking our conversation. As I stood to get the casserole out, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter with James was over, but my story was far from finished. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought of Grandma, of her strength and her love. She had wanted me to be happy, to be cared for. In the end, I realized the person who needed to care for me the most was myself. And with that realization, I knew that no matter where I went or what I did, I would be okay. My name is Elaine, and at 55, I find myself in the sterile quietude of a hospital room, the IV drip a constant reminder of the battle I'm facing, cancer. The cold touch of the sheets is a stark contrast to the warmth I used to feel at home, now a distant memory. 15 years have lapsed since I walked down the aisle to George, a widower with a bright-eyed daughter, Mia. She was 10, all pigtails and toothy smiles, eagerly accepting me not just as her father's wife, but as a mother in spirit. She became the daughter I never had, the unexpected joy in a marriage I thought would fill the pages of my life with love and companionship. George was a man of stature, a businessman whose allure was as much about his charisma as it was the way he seemed ready to build a new life with me. But time has a way of eroding facades, and his once tender patience gave way to relentless demands. I'd trudge home from my job as a financial analyst, a role that demanded precision and left little room for error, only to find a second shift awaiting me. A test of my domestic diligence I was bound to fail in his eyes. I remember his exacting standards, the way he'd scrutinize the dinner table. "Elaine, is this the best you could do?" he'd ask, barely looking at the carefully prepared dishes before him. His words were like weights, each one piling on until I felt I could barely stand. Yet I continued to cook, clean, and care for him, even when my body screamed for rest. My parents, God bless them, would often tell me, "Elaine, you need to take care of yourself too." But their advice would fall on deaf ears. I was too caught up in the cycle of appeasement. It's during one of these silent meals that my cell phone vibrates, startling me from my thoughts. It's Mia. Her voice is a balm to my tired spirit. "Mom, how are you holding up?" I try to sound stronger than I feel. "I'm hanging in there, sweetie. How are you?" She's silent for a beat too long, and I know she's carrying a weight too heavy for her young shoulders. "I'm worried about you, Mom. Dad, he doesn't seem to care." Her words are a punch to the gut, but not unexpected. George's absence in these sterile white walls has been as loud as the blips on the monitors beside me. "Mia, love, I know. It's okay. We have each other," I say, the words tasting like a mix of sadness and resolve. There's a pause, and then her voice, laced with a quiet strength, comes through. We do. And I'm here, every step of the way. Don't worry about Dad. Worry about getting better. Her reassurance is the anchor I didn't know I needed. When she visits, we don't talk about George, or the cold dinners, or the way his eyes no longer held any warmth for me. Instead, we talk about her job, the books she's reading, the life she's building. Her resilience and independence make me proud, and I cling to the fact that I played some part in shaping the incredible woman she's become. I lie back, closing my eyes as Mia's promises echo in my mind. The hospital room feels less confining somehow, as if her words have breathed life into its corners. I am not alone, and that's a thought worth holding on to. The day starts before the sun peeks over the horizon, my alarm clock a relentless foe. I'm up, pulling on the clothes I laid out the night before, my movements as automatic as the coffee maker that sputters to life in the kitchen. George is still asleep, the rise and fall of his chest the only evidence of life. At work, the numbers and spreadsheets are a welcome distraction. They don't complain, they don't demand, they just exist in their black and white cells, waiting for me to make sense of them. My colleagues are another story, buzzing around with office gossip and weekend plans. "Elaine, you've got to come out with us one of these Fridays," Janet from accounting says, popping her head into my cubicle. I manage a smile, though I can't remember the last time I had plans that didn't involve George or a grocery list. "Thanks, Janet. Maybe next time." She gives me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder before buzzing off to her next conversation. Home again, the routine continues. I'm chopping vegetables for the stew George likes when he walks in, early from work. His mood's a toss-up. I brace myself for whatever version of him is coming through the door. "Smells good," he says, which feels like a small victory. I let out the breath I've been holding. "It should be ready in about an hour," I respond, keeping my tone even. He grunts, disappearing into the living room. The TV comes to life, and I'm left alone in the kitchen with the carrots and potatoes. I find comfort in the rhythm of my knife against the cutting board, a simple, predictable sound. Later, we sit across from each other at the dining table, a chasm of unsaid words between us. He's scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging the meal. "It's good," he mumbles after a few minutes, but there's a distance in his voice that's become all too familiar. I nod, my own phone lighting up with a text from Mia. "Thinking of you, Mom. Hope dinner went well." I type back a quick, "Love you," and slip the phone back into my pocket. George looks up, eyes narrowing. "Was that Mia?" "Yeah, just checking in," I say, trying to keep the conversation light. He nods, going back to his phone, and we finish dinner in silence. I clean up, the clinking of dishes filling the empty air. Tomorrow will be the same, the grind wearing away like waves on a cliffside, constant and relentless. But tonight, Mia's message is a lifeline, a reminder that not everything is as cold and unforgiving as this routine. There's warmth there, love, and it's enough to keep me going for one more day. The hospital room's constant beeps and murmurs are background noise as I'm lost in thought. It's during one of these quiet moments that Mia walks in, her face etched with worry. I can tell she's bearing a weight, the kind that's ready to topple over. She pulls a chair close to my bed, takes my hand, and sighs deeply. "Mom, there's something you should know," she begins, her voice a mix of anger and sorrow. I squeeze her hand, encouraging her to continue. "What is it, Mia?" "It's about Dad," she pauses, gathering her thoughts. He has someone else." The words hang heavily between us. I had felt the presence of someone in our lives, an invisible intruder, but hearing it confirmed sends a chill through me. "He introduced her to me, Mom," Mia's voice cracks, "as his future wife." The air feels thick, like I'm breathing through cotton. I try to absorb the shock, to maintain some sense of composure for Mia's sake, but inside, I'm reeling. "When?" The word comes out as a whisper. "Last week. He told me he was serious about her," Mia replies, her eyes not leaving mine, a silent apology in her gaze. There's a long pause as I process this betrayal. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart," I manage to say at last. "How long have you known?" "Just a few days," she admits. "I didn't want to upset you, but I thought it's better you hear it from me." The dull hum of the hospital seems to fade into silence. I'm grateful for her honesty, yet the pain is sharp, unyielding. I nod, feeling an odd sense of calm amidst the turmoil. "We'll deal with this," I say, more to convince myself than to reassure her. Mia leans forward, resting her forehead against our clasped hands. "I'm here for you, Mom, whatever you need." I draw a deep breath, my mind already turning. My husband's betrayal is a deep cut, but I won't let it be the end of my story. There's a plan forming, a way out of the mess he's made. And in this sterile hospital room, with my stepdaughter by my side, I feel the first stirrings of a future where I am no longer in the shadows of a loveless marriage. I will rise from this, with a cunning that's been honed by years of quiet observation. George may have underestimated me, but he'll soon learn that's his mistake. I look at Mia, her strength becoming my own. "Let's start planning," I say, and there's a new determination in my voice. Our bond, unbroken by the lies that surround us, is the foundation we'll build upon. And as Mia smiles, a small, fierce smile, I know we'll win this battle together. The next day, Mia arrives with her laptop tucked under her arm and a look in her eyes that says she means business. She pulls up a chair next to my hospital bed, opens her laptop, and looks straight at me. "Okay, Mom, let's talk strategy," she says with a determined nod. I can't help but smile at her spirit. "I've been thinking about that," I admit. "I want to be fair, but also, I want to protect myself and my future, and yours." Mia nods, her fingers poised over the keyboard. "First things first, we should get a lawyer, someone who can help us navigate the divorce smoothly." I agree. "Yes, a lawyer, and we'll need to gather all the financial documents. I've got most of them at home in the safe." "We can go through them together," Mia offers. "What about the house and the rest of the assets?" "I've been doing some math," I start, feeling the edge of the bed with my fingers. "The house. I think I'll let him have it." Mia frowns, surprised. "Really? Are you sure?" I nod firmly. "I want a fresh start, somewhere new, without the memories. Plus, I've got something he doesn't know about." Her eyebrows raise in curiosity. "What's that?" "The investment account," I say. "The one my father helped me set up. It's in his name, technically, but it's mine. There's quite a bit of money there, enough for a new place and a comfortable life." Mia's eyes widen. "He doesn't know about that?" "No, and he won't," I state. "That money was from before we married. It's separate, and I want to keep it that way." Mia types away, probably making notes. "Got it. We keep that account quiet. We should also think about alimony or any spousal support." I shake my head. I don't want his money, but I won't say no if it's offered. It could be useful. "Okay," Mia says. "And after the legal stuff is sorted?" "That's when I start my new life," I say, looking out the window. "I want to travel, see places I've always dreamed of. When I'm well, of course." Mia reaches out and squeezes my hand. "You'll get well, Mom, and I'll be right there with you wherever you go." I squeeze back, feeling a surge of gratitude for this girl. No, this woman, who's been my rock. "We're in this together," I tell her, "and it's more than just about the plan. It's about us, our journey ahead, and the unspoken understanding that we're a team now." The afternoon sun casts long shadows across my bed as we continue to plot, not just for the end of my marriage, but for the beginning of something new. Just the two of us, ready to face whatever comes next. A few days had passed since Mia and I had put together a plan. Lying on my hospital bed, I felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety about setting our plan into motion. Mia walked into the room, her face flushed from the cold outside. "All right, it's time," she said, sitting down beside me. "Are you sure you're up for this, Mom?" I nodded, the IV in my arm a stark reminder of my current weakness, but my resolve was strong. "I'm sure, it's now or never." Mia took out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. "I'm about to text Dad. I'll tell him that you want to discuss the divorce and that you're willing to talk settlement." "That'll get his attention," I murmured, the bitterness in my voice belying my calm exterior. Mia sent the text, and we waited. It didn't take long for her phone to buzz. She read the message and looked up at me. He's biting. Wants to come over tomorrow to talk terms. I couldn't help the wry chuckle that escaped my lips. Talk terms, huh? All right. When he comes, let him believe he's in control. That's the bait. Mia frowned slightly, her concern for me clear. And you're okay with this? With him coming here and acting like he's won? I reached for her hand, my grip firmer than it had been in days. It's just an act, Mia. Remember that. We're letting him think he's won because it's the only way to get what we need from him. Mia squeezed my hand back, her own determination returning to her eyes. Okay, Mom. I trust you. And, I added, make sure he sees the safe when he comes. It's empty, but he doesn't know that. If he thinks there's something valuable in there, it'll keep him focused on the wrong thing. She nodded, making a mental note. Got it. And after he leaves? We proceed with the divorce as planned. But remember, whatever happens, don't let on about the money. That's our ace. Mia stood up, her phone in her pocket. I won't. We'll get through this, just like you said, together. As she walked out, I lay back against my pillow, closing my eyes. This was just the beginning, but I had to believe that it would lead to an end. Our end, one where Mia and I could move forward, free from the shadows of deceit that had loomed over us for far too long. The morning light crept through the blinds, casting lines across the hospital room floor. I had barely slept, thoughts whirling about the upcoming confrontation. I tried to steady my breathing, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside my bed, a constant reminder of my situation. There was a knock on the door, and Mia peeked in, her face serious. He's here, Mom. I nodded, sitting up a little straighter. Let him in. Mia opened the door, and in walked George, my soon-to-be ex-husband. He had a smirk on his face that made my stomach turn, but I kept my expression neutral. Hello, George, I said, my voice steady. Didn't expect to see you looking so alive, he sneered, taking a seat without being offered one. So, what's this about a settlement? I took a deep breath. I want to keep things simple. No dragging this out. You can have the house. His smirk widened. That's generous of you. What's the catch? No catch, I replied, meeting his gaze. I just want to end this cleanly. I'm tired, George. I don't have the energy for a fight. Mia watched, her face a mask of control. George's eyes flicked to her and then to the safe in the corner of the room. I suppose you'll be wanting support then? He asked, a greedy glint in his eyes. I shook my head slightly. No, I don't want your money. I'll manage on my own. He leaned back, looking suspicious. What's your game here? You're giving up everything. What are you hiding? Nothing to hide, I said, allowing a hint of fatigue to seep into my voice. I just want peace, George, and I think you do too. He snorted. Yeah, peace, with a young, beautiful woman waiting for me. Mia's hand clenched into a fist, but she didn't speak. I hope she makes you happy, I said quietly. George stood up, looking around the room once more. Fine. I'll have my lawyer call yours. We'll get this over with. As he reached the door, he paused and looked back at me. You're a fool, you know that? Letting go of everything without a fight. I met his gaze, my own eyes clear. Maybe, but sometimes, letting go is the only way to move forward. George shook his head and left, the door closing with a soft click behind him. Mia rushed to my side. Are you okay, Mom? I nodded, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. I'm fine, it's done. Now we just have to follow through. Mia hugged me, her presence a comfort. You're the bravest person I know. I hugged her back, allowing myself this moment of warmth. Brave? Maybe. But I'm not in this alone, am I? No, Mom, Mia whispered. Not alone, never alone. The ink on the divorce papers wasn't even dry when Mia dropped the bomb about the money. She was hesitant at first, biting her lip in that way she does when she's nervous. But I urged her on, knowing that whatever came next was just another scene in this absurd play my life had become. Dad knows about the $3 million, Mom, Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, not surprised. I expected as much. What's his play? It didn't take long for him to make his move. The next day, he was at my hospital room door, his eyes wide with a mix of greed and desperation. He knelt by my bed, taking my hand in his. "I've been a fool," he started, his voice trembling with feigned emotion. "Please, let's put all this behind us and start over." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing. It was liberating. I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, deep laugh that I hadn't felt in years. "Start over?" I said, pulling my hand away. "There's nothing to start, George. It's done." His face turned an ugly shade of red, the mask slipping. "You think you can mock me?" he hissed. "I'll take you to court. I'll take every penny of that money." "That money," I said calmly, almost enjoying this, "is safely out of your reach. It's in my father's name. There's not a thing you can do about it." His eyes bulged and he spluttered, his anger a living thing between us. But before he could form words, security was at the door, alerted by the commotion. They didn't even need to speak. Their presence was enough. George's outburst was his final act, his curtain call. As they escorted him out, his shouts echoed down the hall, a pitiful sound that faded with each step. I leaned back against my pillows, a sense of peace settling over me. Mia, who had stood by the door, her face a mix of worry and anger, finally let out a long breath. "Are you okay, Mom?" I reached for her hand, a smile playing on my lips. "I am now, sweetheart. It's truly over." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past lifting, leaving room for something new, something better. And as the door closed on the last vestige of my old life, I felt ready to face a new day. It was a clean slate, a true new beginning, and I was ready to write my own story. Life after cancer, and George felt like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into sunlight. I bought a house with a big garden, somewhere Mia could visit whenever she wanted, a place that felt like ours, truly ours. One afternoon, Mia and I were sitting on the porch, sipping lemonade and watching the sun dip below the trees. She had been helping me unpack boxes, turning the house into a home. Her laughter was a frequent sound here, echoing off the walls, filling spaces that had known too much silence. "You know, Mom," Mia said, her eyes scanning the yard, "I've never seen you this relaxed." I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. "I have a lot to be thankful for. I beat cancer, I'm free of George, and I have you." She squeezed my hand. "I'm just glad you're finally putting yourself first. You always took care of me, even when I wasn't your responsibility." I shook my head. "You were always my responsibility, Mia. The moment I decided to be your mom, that was it. You were my family." Mia's eyes misted over, and she gave me a teary smile. "I'm glad he's out of our lives. I've never liked how he treated you, and now we don't have to deal with his drama anymore." The sun had almost set, and the sky was a canvas of purples and oranges. I stood up, feeling more alive than I had in years. "Let's go inside. I'll make us dinner, our favorite spaghetti and meatballs." She hopped up, following me into the kitchen. "Can I help?" she asked, rolling up her sleeves. "Of course. You can start by rolling the meatballs." We moved around the kitchen together, a dance we had perfected over years of cooking side by side. As I watched her hands, so much like mine, shaping the meatballs, a sense of contentment washed over me. This is what real family feels like, I thought. There were no harsh words here, no expectations or disappointments. Just me and Mia, and a future we could shape into whatever we wanted. Our laughter and the aromatic sense of our shared cooking efforts filled the kitchen, and I knew, deep down, that this was what happiness felt like. After years of just going through the motions, I was finally living. And I had the real family, my daughter, to thank for it. I'm Emily. I was a 25-year-old living a quiet, unremarkable existence with my boyfriend Mike, in a relationship that had seen better days. We'd been together since college, a pair drawn together more by familiarity than by the fervent passion of star-crossed lovers. Our arguments were frequent, often about Mike's disinterest in planning for the future, or his latest gaming marathon that would last well into the early hours, leaving me to sleep alone. We were two people dancing around the inevitable conversation of, "Where's this going?" without ever actually taking the floor. It's not that we didn't care for each other. It's just that somewhere along the line, we stopped trying to make it work. My parents, Sue and George, were the antithesis of us. Married for over 30 years, they still exchanged loving glances and shared private jokes, their bond seemingly unbreakable. They were my foundation, the steadfast love I aspired to find for myself, even if it wasn't going to be with Mike. On the evening of the crash, I remember arguing with Mike over something as trivial as unsorted laundry. He had promised to do it, and once again, the promise was as empty as the laundry basket was full. "Can't you just do one thing you say you're going to do?" I had asked, exasperation straining my voice. "It's just laundry, Em. It'll get done. Eventually," he had replied, his attention fixed on his computer screen. The argument had fizzled out as they usually did, with neither of us truly addressing the underlying issues. Later, as I sat in the back seat of my parents' car, the warmth of their chatter was a soothing balm to the residual frustration from the argument with Mike. They were celebrating another year of Mom's life, and their joy was infectious. Then, the world turned on its axis. Headlights merged with the sound of metal on metal, and everything went black. When I awoke, it was to the antiseptic smell of a hospital, the relentless beeping of the heart monitor, and a heavy blanket of dread. The doctor's words were clinical and detached, but the message was clear. My parents didn't make it, and my legs, my perfectly normal, taken-for-granted legs, might never carry me again. The truth settled like a stone in my stomach. I was suddenly, terrifyingly alone. Mike, the man I had just argued with about laundry, was now my only connection to a life before the crash. The life where my biggest worry was whether he'd sort the whites from the colors. As the reality of my parents' absence and my potential paralysis began to truly register, a hollow despair took root in me. The future, once a landscape of possibilities, now seemed like a barren field. The hospital room was a bubble where time moved both too quickly and not at all. After what seemed like an eternity of white walls and echoing silence, Mike walked in, his parents, Janet and Bob, a step behind him. The atmosphere was thick with a somberness that made my heart sink even lower, if that was possible. Mike pulled a chair up next to my bed and took my hand, his usual bravado absent. His parents stood by the door, a united front of awkward concern. "Hey, Em," Mike began, his voice a rough whisper. "I've been doing some thinking, a lot of thinking, actually." "Thinking?" I echoed, my voice dull. "About what?" "About us," he said, and his eyes met mine, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. All of this, it's made me see how short life can be. I wanted to say something, to ask what he meant, but the words seemed to stick in my throat. "I don't want to wait for the perfect moment anymore because it might never come," he continued, squeezing my hand. "What I'm trying to say is, will you marry me, Emily?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. It was the last thing I thought I'd hear, especially now. I searched his face for a sign of the impulsive Mike I knew, the one who acted first and thought later. But all I saw was earnestness. His mother, Janet, stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. "We want you to be a part of our family, Emily. We'll take care of you." "And it's not out of pity," Bob added quickly. "It's because we love you, and we want to support Mike in taking this step." I was stunned, my mind racing. This was a lifeline, unexpected, and maybe even a little reckless, but a lifeline nonetheless. I looked at Mike, really looked at him, and saw not just my sometimes immature boyfriend, but a man offering his support in the most uncertain time of my life. "Mike, My voice trailed off as I tried to gather my thoughts. "It's okay, Em. You don't have to decide right now. I just wanted you to know how I feel," he said, his thumb rubbing circles on the back of my hand. I thought about my parents, about the unwavering love and support they had always shown me. Wasn't this what they would have wanted? For me to be loved and cared for, no matter what? "Mike, I don't know what the future holds for me, for us. But yes," I found myself saying, the words stronger than I felt. Yes, I'll marry you." A smile, the first genuine one I'd seen in days, spread across Mike's face. Janet let out a soft sob, covering her mouth with her hand, and even Bob's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Moving into my parents' house with Mike should have been a fresh start, a new chapter. The house was too big for just one person, and everywhere I looked, I saw memories of my parents. I thought having Mike with me would fill some of those empty spaces, but I was quickly learning that his presence was a reminder of what was missing, not a replacement. The first few days, he was attentive, always checking on me, making sure I had everything I needed within reach. But as days turned into weeks, the attentive husband act began to wear thin. Mike started spending more time on his computer, his headphones on, shutting me out. One evening, as I maneuvered my wheelchair into the kitchen, I found him staring blankly at his screen. "Mike, have you thought about looking for a new job?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "The insurance won't cover everything, and the bills are starting to pile up." He didn't look away from the screen. "I told you, Em, I'm taking care of you now. That's my job." "But I can take care of myself during the day," I pushed back, feeling a twinge of frustration. "You don't need to be here all the time." Finally, he turned to face me, his expression a mix of irritation and something else I couldn't quite read. "What do you want from me, Em? I'm here, aren't I?" I was taken aback by his tone. "Being physically here isn't the same as being present, Mike. I need a partner, not just a roommate." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. "You know what, Em? Maybe I need more than this too. Maybe I wasn't cut out to be a nursemaid." His words stung, and I watched him storm out, the door slamming behind him. I was left alone in the silence of the kitchen, the weight of his words settling around me like dust. I wasn't just alone, I was lonely. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but think about how quickly our modest honeymoon period had ended. The vows we had taken felt like they were from another lifetime. The Mike, who had lovingly promised to be by my side, in sickness and in health, seemed like a stranger now. As the weeks dragged on, his absences grew longer, and the excuses more flimsy. He was either out with friends or lost in a digital world that didn't seem to have room for me. I felt like an obstacle in his life, a burden he hadn't anticipated. One particularly tough day, when the pain was bad, and the house felt more like a mausoleum than a home, I heard the front door open. Expecting Mike, I called out, "Is that you?" "Yeah, it's me," he replied, his voice distant. "I'm just grabbing a few things, then I'm heading out again." I wheeled myself to the hallway, watching as he rifled through a drawer for his keys. "Going out with friends?" I asked, trying to mask the hurt in my voice. He paused, keys in hand, and sighed. I need some space, okay? It's not easy for me either, all this." I nodded, biting back tears. "I know. I just thought we could maybe spend some time together, like we used to." He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Maybe when things settle down a bit, I gotta go." The house felt emptier with each passing day, a vast space filled with silence and the ghost of better times. It wasn't just Mike's absence or the silence left in the wake of my parents' voices. It was the small things that started to go missing. A vase my mother loved, a silver frame holding a family photo, a painting that used to hang in the hallway. I first noticed it when I was trying to distract myself with memories. I wheeled myself into the living room, intent on looking through the photo albums. But as my eyes scanned the room, they fell on the bare patch of wall where the painting had been. Confusion knotted my brow. "Mike!" I called out, unsure when he had last gone out. There was no answer, and the emptiness of the house seemed to echo back at me. That evening, when Mike returned, I asked him, "Have you seen the landscape painting that used to be in the hallway?" He barely glanced up from his phone. "Oh, that old thing? Yeah, it was getting dusty, and I figured we could use the space for something else." Something about his casual dismissal didn't sit right with me. "But it was my mom's favorite," I said, a tremor of unease in my voice. He shrugged, his attention still half on his screen. "We can get another painting, Em. It's no big deal." But it was a big deal. The items that went missing next were unmistakable, things that had been in my family for years. One afternoon, I caught Janet, Mike's mom, in the act. She was bustling around the living room with a big black garbage bag. "Janet, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp with alarm. She jumped, a guilty flush creeping up her neck. "Oh, just some spring cleaning, dear. This place is cluttered with so many old things." "But those are my things," I protested, my heart rate picking up. There, she cooed, her voice sickly sweet. "We're just making things nicer for you. You'll thank us later." I watched her like a hawk every time she visited after that, but the thefts became sneakier, more calculated. And every time I brought it up, I was met with reassurances that it was all in my best interest. One night, lying in bed, I turned to Mike, who was scrolling through his phone, as had become his nighttime ritual. "Mike, your parents have been taking things from the house. My things." He didn't look up. "Mom's just trying to help. You know she's got a knack for this stuff." "Help?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "By taking my parents' belongings?" He sighed, finally setting his phone down and turning to face me. "Look, Em, they think we should be looking forward, not backward. They're just trying to take some of the load off you." I wanted to scream, to rage against the violation, the disrespect. But I was tired of fighting, tired of questioning my own sanity. "This isn't what I want," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. Mike reached over and patted my hand, a gesture that felt more patronizing than comforting. "Try to get some sleep, Em. Things will look better in the morning." I couldn't take it anymore and confided in Anna, my closest friend who was also a massage therapist. She had been helping with my rehabilitation, her visits a rare source of relief. "Anna, things are going missing around the house," I confided as she worked on my stiff muscles. "And I can't shake the feeling that Mike and his parents are behind it." Anna paused, her hands stilling on my shoulders. "Have you talked to Mike about this?" "I have, but he just brushes it off. Says his parents are helping us by decluttering." I let out a hollow laugh. "But it's only my family's things that are disappearing." Anna's brows furrowed in concern. "That doesn't sound right, Em. Do you want me to do something? Maybe come by more often? Keep an eye out?" The idea sparked something in me, a plan forming from the embers of my frustration. "Could you, I don't know, maybe help me set up some sort of camera or something to record what's going on when I'm not in the room?" With a nod of determination, Anna agreed. "I'll bring something over tomorrow. We'll get to the bottom of this." True to her word, Anna came back the next day with some discreet recording devices, which she placed in strategic locations around the house. It felt like something out of a spy movie, and if I wasn't so desperate for the truth, I might have laughed at the absurdity of it all. A few days later, Anna returned with the recordings, and we sat down to listen. The voices of Mike and his parents filled the room, and the blood in my veins turned to ice as their scheme unfolded through their casual conversation. "And once we get her committed, the house and everything in it will be ours," Mike's voice said, clear and cold. "Yeah, the place will sell for a fortune, and all those antiques? Pure profit," his mother added, her tone greedy. "We just need to make sure Emily doesn't catch on before we have everything in place," his father chimed in. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to their betrayal. These people, who had promised to care for me, to be my family, were plotting against me. Anna reached over, her hand gripping mine tightly. "We have to do something, Em," she said, her voice laced with anger. I wiped my eyes, the sorrow quickly giving way to a steely resolve. "We will. I'm not going to let them get away with this." The morning after listening to the recordings, I tried to act normal, but every word they said, every smile they gave, felt like a lie. It was during breakfast when I noticed something was off. The usual noise of the city that drifted in through the open window was absent. I wheeled myself over to see what was happening, only to find that the ramps that allowed me access to the garden were gone. "Mike!" I called out, my voice laced with panic. "Where are the ramps?" He came into the room, feigning ignorance. "The ramps? Oh, they were looking a bit worn. Thought they needed fixing." I stared at him, the man I thought I knew. "And you didn't think to tell me? How am I supposed to get around?" His gaze was evasive as he shrugged. "I just thought you'd be safer inside for now. You know, until we get new ones." The room felt like it was spinning, and it wasn't from my injury. Safer? Or trapped? The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't respond, just turned and walked away, leaving me stewing in a mix of anger and helplessness. Later, when I asked Janet about it, she was syrupy sweet with false concern. "We're just looking out for you, dear. We wouldn't want you to have an accident," she said, touching my shoulder with feigned tenderness. I pulled away from her touch, feeling the sting of their deceit. "I didn't realize needing ramps qualified as a hazard," I replied, my voice steady though my insides were shaking. Janet's eyes hardened for a moment before she regained her composure. "We're just trying to help, Emily. It's for the best." That night, as I lay in bed, the darkness felt oppressive. Mike was out again, probably drowning his guilt in cheap beer and cheaper thrills. I reached for my phone, the screen a small beacon in the dark, and dialed the number Anna had given me for emergencies. "Anna," I whispered when she picked up, "they've removed the ramps. I'm literally trapped in my own home." Her voice was firm, a lifeline in the tumultuous sea I was drowning in. "Hang tight, Em. I'm going to make some calls. We're going to sort this out." Next day, I was in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell. My heart pounded as I maneuvered towards the entrance. It was Anna, flanked by a man and woman wearing crisp suits and stern expressions. They were from a local disability rights organization, here to assess my living situation. Beside them was my lawyer, Mr. Hammond, clutching a leather briefcase. "Emily, we're here to make things right," Anna said, her determination matching the resolve in my chest. Mr. Hammond stepped forward. "We need to establish the facts first, Emily. I'll need to see the house, check against the inventory of your parents' belongings." As we moved through the house, the representatives from the service took notes, their disapproval clear at the missing ramps and the blatant disregard for my welfare. Mike walked in during the commotion, surprise etching his face. "Em, what's going on? Who are these people?" I looked at him, really looked at him, allowing the full weight of my gaze to settle on his shoulders. "I'm taking back control, Mike. This is my lawyer, and these are advocates for people with disabilities. They're here to ensure my home is safe and that my rights are respected." Janet and Bob entered the fray, confusion turning to fear as they realized the seriousness of the situation. "Emily, darling, what is this about?" Janet's voice trembled. "It's about my rights, my home, and the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Mr. Hammond is here to confirm the inventory of my inheritance." Mr. Hammond opened his briefcase, pulling out documents and photographs. "We have detailed records of all items bequeathed to Mrs. Harper. It seems several are missing." Bob's face paled. "Now, Emily, I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I replied, the recordings Anna had provided playing in my head. "And I have more than just missing items to discuss." Mike's parents looked at each other, the facade of the caring in-laws crumbling before my eyes. Mike stood there, silent, the reality of the situation dawning on him. Anna moved closer to me. "We also have evidence of the conversations you've had regarding Emily's property and well-being." The advocates from the Disability Service spoke up. "Removing access to the ramps is a direct violation of Mrs. Harper's rights. We'll be taking action." As Mr. Hammond laid out the evidence of their theft and their plans for my future, I saw the trap I had been in from the outside. But now, the tables had turned. I was no longer the victim in their game. I was the one calling the shots. Mike finally found his voice. I can explain." But I shook my head. "Save it, Mike. I've heard enough." Janet started to cry, and Bob put an arm around her, but there was no comfort to be found in their deceit. The day of the trial was a culmination of everything I had endured. The courtroom was stark, the air thick with tension. Mike and his parents were on one side, looking nothing like the family that had once promised to care for me. I was on the other, with Anna beside me and Mr. Hammond at the ready, with his briefcase of evidence. As the proceedings began, the judge looked down at us from his bench, his gaze lingering on me for a moment. "We are here to examine the evidence regarding the allegations of theft and the premeditated exploitation of Emily Harper," he said. Mr. Hammond presented the recordings, the inventory discrepancies, and testimonies from the disability advocates. The evidence was damning, and Mike's family could do little but squirm under the weight of their own deceit. Janet sobbed quietly, her sobs a soundtrack to the unraveling of their scheme. "We never meant for things to go this far," she whispered when it was her turn to speak. The judge's voice was firm as he addressed them. "You took advantage of a vulnerable person. There's no excuse for your actions." Mike stood, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, Em. I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at him, the history we shared playing out in a flash before my eyes. "Sorry isn't enough, Mike. You chose this path." The gavel came down like the final word on the life I had once known. Mike and his parents were found guilty. Reparations were ordered, and they were to have no further contact with me. With the help of Anna and a dedicated team, I started physical therapy. Each small movement was a victory, each step a testament to my resilience. My legs, once lifeless, began to tingle with new strength. One day, as I managed to stand with the help of parallel bars, Anna cheered me on. "Look at you, Em, you're doing it!" The smile on my face was mirrored in her own. "I am, aren't I?" The joy bubbled up from a place I thought had been broken beyond repair. And so, I moved forward, one day at a time. The house, once a mausoleum of my past life, was slowly transformed back into a home, a sanctuary where I healed and grew stronger. My name is Sarah, and this is my story. I'm married to Tom, a kind-hearted man with a smile that could light up the darkest room. We've been married for 4 years, but it feels like we've been together for a lifetime. We met at a local coffee shop, bumped into each other by accident, and the rest, as they say, is history. But there's one part of my life that feels more like a recurring bad dream. Martha, Tom's mom. Martha is, well, she's a character. Since we got married, she's had this habit of dropping by unannounced. It was annoying at first, but now it's just part of our daily routine. She's got something to say about everything and anything I do, and it's never praise. It was just another Tuesday evening. I was in the kitchen, the aroma of roasted chicken filling the air, setting the table for 3. Tom was on his way home, and Martha, of course, decided to pop in. "Chicken, Sarah? Again?" Martha walked into the kitchen, her voice dripping with disappointment. "If it were me, I'd have made pork. Tom loves my pork roast." I tried to keep my cool. "Tom likes chicken too, Martha, and it's healthier." She clicked her tongue, moving closer to inspect the salad. "Lettuce and tomatoes. How original." Just then, Tom walked in. "Something smells good," he said, wrapping his arms around me. He kissed my cheek before noticing his mother. "Mom, what a surprise." "Not a good one, apparently," Martha muttered, eyeing the chicken like it had personally offended her. Tom caught my eye, a silent plea there. "Be nice to her," it said. "She's had a tough year." I sighed, the fight draining out of me. "Dinner's ready. Let's eat." We sat down, and the usual happened. Tom talked about his day. I chimed in with stories of my own, and Martha found a way to criticize every single thing. When Tom complimented the chicken, saying it was just as good as any pork roast, I saw Martha's lips thin, but for once, she kept quiet. That night, as Tom and I cleaned up and Martha watched her favorite game show in the living room, I wondered how many more dinners like this I could take. It wasn't the chicken or the pork that was the problem. It was the constant feeling of not being good enough for the woman who mattered most to Tom. But as I looked at Tom, who was whistling while drying the dishes, I knew I'd endure it, for him. Because that's what you do for love, right? You put up with a little rain to get to the rainbow. Or in my case, a little bit of Martha to get to the rest of my life with Tom. If life were a straight road, mine had taken a turn into a lane with speed bumps named Martha. When I found out I was pregnant, Tom and I were over the moon. But joy comes with its own set of challenges. My job as an event planner was demanding, with hours as unpredictable as Martha's mood swings. So I made the tough choice to step down to a less taxing role, which unfortunately meant a smaller paycheck. It was a Sunday morning, and I was flipping pancakes, humming to myself, feeling content. Tom was reading at the table, and then, as if on cue, Martha walked in, her presence immediately changing the air. "So, Sarah, how does it feel to contribute less to the household?" Martha didn't waste any time, going straight for the jugular as she poured herself a cup of coffee. I flipped another pancake, choosing my words carefully. "It feels responsible, Martha. I need to take care of myself and the baby." "Babies don't need money, huh? Interesting logic," she retorted, taking a sip and making a face. "This coffee is weak." Tom looked up, his brow furrowed. "Mom, that's not fair. Sarah is doing what's best for our family." Martha scoffed. "Oh, please. When I was pregnant, I worked until the day I gave birth, and I made sure to contribute equally." I plated the pancakes and sat down, trying to keep the peace. "Times are different now, Martha, and I'm still working, just not as much." She shook her head, her disapproval as clear as the sunny day outside. "You just make sure you don't get too comfortable. Money doesn't grow on trees." The conversation hung heavy over breakfast. Even the pancakes tasted like tension. Tom squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. But as I watched Martha pick at her food with a sour expression, I knew this was far from over. I was bracing myself for a long road ahead, full of Martha's backhanded comments. But in my heart, I knew the peace of mind from a lesser-stressed pregnancy was worth any pay cut. And I'd do it all over again if it meant a healthier me and a healthier baby. Life has a funny way of flipping the script. Before Jamie, my home office was a place of tranquility. Now it's a circus, and I'm the juggler. Working from home while taking care of a newborn is like trying to thread a needle on a roller coaster. But it's our roller coaster, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. One Wednesday afternoon, as I was knee-deep in emails and baby burp cloths, the doorbell rang. I knew without looking. It was Martha. "Just a minute," I called out, balancing Jamie on one hip and my laptop on the other. When I opened the door, there she stood, purse and judgment in hand. "You look like you could use some help," she remarked, pushing past me into the living room. I followed her, settling Jamie into his bouncer. "I've got it under control, Martha. It's just a busy day." She peered at my laptop screen, then at Jamie, who was trying to decide if he was hungry or sleepy. "Doesn't seem like it. You know, when Tom was a baby, I made sure everything was spotless, and he was always my focus." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to defend my scattered living room. "Well, times have changed, Martha. Working from home is a balancing act." She sat down, watching me like a hawk. "Does Tom know how chaotic it is here?" I sat across from her, trying to maintain a sense of calm. "Tom understands. He knows I'm doing my best." Martha tutted, looking around with thinly veiled disapproval. I suppose your best will have to do." I wanted to tell her that my best was more than enough, that I was a good mom and a good worker. But with Jamie starting to fuss, I didn't have the energy for another round with her. As she left, Martha's parting words were, "Remember, Sarah, a mother's place is with her child, not with her work." I closed the door gently, leaning against it for a moment. Her words stung, but as I picked up Jamie and he smiled, all gums and drool, I knew I was doing all right. Work can wait. These moments with Jamie cannot. And if that means my living room is a bit messy, so be it. It's our mess, and it's perfect. 4 years into our marriage, and life had settled into a rhythm, albeit one constantly interrupted by the discordant notes of my mother-in-law, Martha's visits. The first year of Jamie's life was a whirlwind of diapers, late-night lullabies, and the struggle of maintaining a career from the confines of our home. Now, as I stepped back into the professional arena, my heart ached with the separation from my little boy, but also fluttered with the excitement of reclaiming a piece of my identity. The office was just as I remembered, yet everything felt different. Colleagues welcomed me back with smiles and gentle inquiries about Jamie. My desk, once a shrine to efficiency, now also housed a colorful array of drawings and a photo of Jamie's toothless grin. Each email I sent was punctuated by thoughts of him, each project plan a reminder of the plans I had for his future. Arriving home that evening felt like crossing a finish line. I was greeted by the music of Jamie's giggles as Tom, ever the doting father, flew him around the living room like an airplane. They were in their own world, and for a moment, I was an outsider looking in. It was a pang of jealousy, only a mother returning to work could understand. Before I could even kick off my shoes, the door swung open and Martha made her entrance. "Sarah, back to work I see. And Jamie?" she asked, her tone laced with accusation. "He's been at daycare, and he's doing great," I said, trying to keep my voice light as I took Jamie into my arms. She raised an eyebrow, a silent judgment I knew all too well. "Daycare? At his age? I never would have." Tom intervened. "Mom, the world's different now. We're doing what's right for our family." Martha huffed, moving to the kitchen. "Well, I hope you know what you're doing." The conversation hung in the air, a stalemate of generational differences. Tom and I exchanged a weary look. This was our normal, a delicate dance of defending our choices. Dinner was a quiet affair, Jamie's high chair an island of cheer in a sea of unspoken tensions. Martha barely touched her food, her disapproval a palpable presence at the table. Afterward, as Tom put Jamie to bed, I found myself alone with Martha. "Martha, I know you don't agree with our choices, but I need you to trust that we're doing what's best for Jamie," I said, clearing the plates. She looked at me, her eyes softening for just a second. "Sarah, I just want what's best for him too." "I know, and I appreciate that. But best can mean different things," I replied, hoping to bridge the gap between us. She nodded slowly. "I suppose you're right, but it doesn't mean I have to like it." As I finished the chores and sat down to catch up on some work, the house quieted down. I mulled over the day's events, the juggle between professional and personal, the constant scrutiny from Martha. Each thought was a thread in the complex tapestry of modern motherhood. Over the next few weeks, I found my stride, balancing deadlines with daycare drop-offs, boardroom meetings with bedtime stories. I was proving to myself, more than to Martha, that I could excel at both roles. But her words lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the tightrope I walked daily. One evening, as I watched Jamie sleep, his chest rising and falling in peaceful slumber, I realized that this was my why. The long hours, the missed cuddles, they were all for this moment of tranquility, for the future we were building. And as I turned off the light, a sense of determination settled in my heart. Martha might never understand, but that was okay. This was our life, our choices, our grind. And with Tom and Jamie by my side, I was ready for all of it. When Tom and I approached Martha about watching Jamie while I worked, she accepted with a strange spark in her eye. "Of course I'll watch him. A grandmother's place is with her grandchild," she had said, almost triumphantly. The first day, I left Jamie with her, armed with a list of instructions and a kiss on his forehead. "If you need anything, call me," I reminded her, feeling the familiar tug at my heart as I walked out the door. "Sarah, go to work. We'll be fine," Martha said, her voice tinged with the confidence that only grandmothers possess. But as the days passed, her enthusiasm began to wane. Each evening, I returned to a litany of complaints. "He wouldn't nap. He's too fidgety. He throws his food," she'd report with exasperation. One evening, as I handed her a cup of tea, I ventured cautiously, "Martha, if it's too much, we can look into a daycare for Jamie." She set her cup down with a clatter. "No, I don't trust those places. I'll watch him." "But you seem so tired, and I hate seeing you like this," I replied, concern lacing my words. Martha's eyes met mine, stubborn as ever. "I said no, Sarah. I'm his grandmother. It's my job to endure. And who better to look after him than family?" Her refusal was a familiar dance, one where my suggestions were met with resistance, my concerns with cold rebuttals. "Okay, Martha, if that's what you want," I acquiesced, knowing that arguing was futile. Each morning, I left Jamie in her care, my heart squeezed tight with worry. Each evening, I returned to find Martha a little more worn, a little less patient, but always insistent that she would continue caring for him. Her resilience was as admirable as it was frustrating. I watched her pour her love into Jamie, even as it drained her, and I was left in a constant state of gratitude and guilt. Tom and I would talk after Jamie's bedtime, turning over options in quiet conversation, but we always circled back to Martha's steadfast refusal to let anyone else take over. Just when I thought we had settled into our new normal with Martha looking after Jamie, the unthinkable happened. I was in the middle of a work presentation when my cell phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket. Excusing myself, I stepped out to see Martha's number on the screen. "Martha, I'm at work. Is everything okay?" I answered, my voice tight with concern. "Sarah, I can't do this today. You need to come and get Jamie. Now." Martha's voice was terse, frazzled. I felt a surge of anxiety. "What's wrong? Is Jamie all right?" "He's fine, but I'm not. I need you to come. I can't handle this," she insisted. Panic knotted my stomach. "I can't just leave work at a moment's notice, Martha. Can it wait until my lunch break?" There was a pause, and then, "You'll regret not coming," she said ominously, and hung up. My heart raced. I called back, no answer. I called the daycare to see if they could take Jamie last minute. They could, but I needed to drop him off. I rushed back to my presentation, my mind far from work. An hour later, as soon as I could, I hurried to my car, calling Martha again. Still no answer. Then, a call from an unknown number stopped me dead in my tracks. "Mrs. Thomas? This is Officer Daniels. We have Jamie here at the police station. A woman brought him in, said she couldn't care for him anymore." My breath caught in my throat. "I'll be right there." I sped to the station, thoughts whirling in chaos. Tom met me there, his face pale with worry. "Mr. and Mrs. Thomas?" The officer greeted us. "Your son is safe. The woman, she said she was the grandmother, left him here. She claimed she was feeling unwell." Relief flooded me at the sight of Jamie in the officer's arms, unharmed. "Thank you," I managed to say, taking Jamie into my embrace. Tom and I exchanged a look, the same question in our eyes. What do we do about Martha? We found her at home, sitting on the sofa, flipping through a magazine. "Mom, what happened? Why did you leave Jamie at the police station?" Tom's voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. Martha looked up, unfazed. "I told Sarah I couldn't do it. I wasn't feeling well, and I needed rest." "But you left our son with the police," I exclaimed, still holding Jamie tightly. She shrugged. "I knew they'd find you. I just needed some peace and quiet." Tom ran his hands through his hair, frustration etched on his face. "You can't just abandon a child, Mom, especially not your grandson." Martha sighed, a theatrical display of exhaustion. "Well, I told you I needed you to come, Sarah. You should have come." The implication that this was my fault stung, and I realized then that Martha's manipulations knew no bounds. This wasn't just about her being tired or ill, it was about control. As we put Jamie to bed that night, his small frame snuggled between us. The severity of Martha's actions sank in. This was a breach of trust that couldn't be mended with apologies or excuses. We had to protect our little family, and unfortunately, that meant setting boundaries with Martha. She had taken her opposition to me too far, and we couldn't risk Jamie's safety on her whims. The morning after the police station incident, our house was steeped in a heavy silence. Tom and I sat at the kitchen table, cups of coffee untouched, while Jamie played with his toys on the floor, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. "We need to talk to her, Tom. What she did." I started, the anger from the night before simmering in my voice. Tom nodded, his face grim. "I know. I'll call her." He dialed Martha's number, and I could hear the faint sound of a ringtone from the living room where she slept. There was a click, and then her voice. "Tom, what is it?" "Mom, why didn't you tell us you were feeling unwell before taking Jamie to the police?" Tom's voice was steady, but I could hear the underlying strain. There was a pause on the other end. I just needed to rest. I thought they would call you immediately." Martha's voice was a mix of defensiveness and weariness. "But that's not the way to handle it, Mom. You scared us to death." Tom pressed on. "I didn't mean to." Martha's voice cracked, and I wasn't sure if it was genuine remorse or another act. Tom sighed. "We're going to see what the officers at the station say. They mentioned there was a recording." Martha was silent again, and then, "Fine. Do what you need to do." The call ended, and Tom and I got ready to go to the station. We needed answers. At the station, Officer Daniels greeted us. "We have the footage from when she brought Jamie in. You should see this." We braced ourselves as the officer played the video. There was Martha, looking calm and collected as she handed Jamie over to the officer. Her voice was clear, devoid of distress. "I can't do this anymore. He's the grandson." My heart sank. There was no sign of the sick, distressed grandmother she had claimed to be. "We need a copy of this," Tom said, his voice hard. Back home, Martha was pacing the living room. When we walked in, she turned to us, a question in her eyes. "We saw the footage, Martha," I said, my voice cold. "You weren't sick. You weren't in distress. You lied." Martha's face fell, and then, unexpectedly, she sat down, her shoulders slumping. I couldn't handle it. I thought I could, but..." Tom interrupted her. "You put Jamie at risk. You lied to us, to the police. How could you?" Tears streamed down Martha's face, but the theatrics didn't move us this time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. But it was too late. The trust was broken. That evening, after Martha had packed her things and left, Tom, Jamie, and I sat in the living room, a tight little circle. We didn't say much, but we didn't need to. We had each other, and we would move forward, together. The truth had been painful, but it had also set us free. It had only been a few days since Martha had left when she unexpectedly reappeared at our doorstep. As if the incident had never occurred, she stood there with a smile, offering to watch Jamie. "Martha, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I've come to help with Jamie, like before. You obviously need the help," she said, brushing past me into the house. I was dumbfounded. "Martha, after what happened, you think we can just go back to how things were?" She turned to me with a defiant look. "Well, it wouldn't have happened if you had come when I called," she retorted, her words sharp like daggers. Before I could respond, Tom walked in, his face darkening at the sight of his mother. "What are you saying, Mom? That this was Sarah's fault?" Martha's eyes didn't waver. If she had been a stay-at-home mother like she should be, none of this would have happened. That's when Tom exploded, the anger and frustration that had been simmering for days finally boiling over. "How dare you? You do this out of spite for Sarah, and you put Jamie in danger because of it." Martha recoiled as if slapped, her facade crumbling. "Tom, No, Mom, I don't want to hear it. You've crossed a line. You deliberately ignored Sarah. You neglected your grandson, and for what? To prove a point?" His voice was a crescendo of outrage. She tried to interrupt, to defend herself, but Tom wouldn't have it. "I can't trust you anymore, Mom. I don't want you here. I don't want to talk to you until you realize the gravity of what you've done." Martha looked between us, the realization dawning that she had indeed gone too far. Without another word, she turned and left, the finality of the moment hanging heavy in the air. Tom turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and resolve. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I should have seen it sooner. But I promise you, Jamie's safety comes first. We come first." I nodded, the solidarity between us more potent than ever. "I know, Tom. We'll get through this, just like we always do. Together." We knew the road ahead would be without Martha, at least for the foreseeable future. It was a painful but necessary decision, a line drawn to protect our son, our family, our peace. My name is Karen. 4 years ago, I stepped into a life I thought was perfect. Married at 27 to Michael, a man who promised to carry me in his arms before we even walked down the aisle, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. He wasn't just my husband, he was my best friend, my confidant. We shared everything, from morning coffees to late-night dreams about our future. Michael always had a way of making me feel special. I remember our first anniversary. He recreated our first date, down to the same table at the quaint Italian restaurant where we first realized we were meant for each other. It wasn't just about the grand gestures, it was the little things. The way he'd brush the hair from my face, the soft kisses he'd plant on my forehead when he thought I was asleep. Our life together was bliss, filled with laughter and love. We lived in a beautiful house, spacious and filled with light. It was our haven, a place where we planned to raise a family. My job as a fitness trainer at a popular gym brought me joy and fulfillment, and Michael was thriving in his career. We were doing well financially, and we often talked about starting a family, about having kids running around the house, filling it with even more laughter and joy. Evelyn, Michael's mother, was a strong presence in our lives. From the first time I met her, she showered me with compliments. "You're absolutely stunning, Karen, just like a Hollywood actress from the 50s, she'd said, her eyes sparkling with genuine fondness. She often spoke about how beautiful our children would be, combining my looks with Michael's charm. Her approval meant the world to me. But then, one ordinary evening, everything changed. I was driving home from the gym, my mind buzzing with plans for the weekend. Michael and I had planned a small getaway, just the two of us, a chance to reconnect and talk more about our future, about finally starting that family we'd always wanted. As I approached the intersection, a song we both loved started playing on the radio. I smiled, turning up the volume, lost in the moment. That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, a car ran the red light and slammed into my side. The impact was deafening, a cacophony of crunching metal and shattering glass. My head whipped to the side, and pain erupted across my face and body. The world spun wildly, a blur of lights and sounds, and then, as quickly as it had all started, everything plunged into silence and darkness. Waking up in the hospital was like emerging into a world I no longer recognized. My body was a patchwork of aches and bandages. The first few days were a blur of doctors, painkillers, and Michael's face, etched with worry. Michael sat beside me, holding my hand. His voice was gentle, but his eyes couldn't hide his concern. "Hey, how are you feeling?" he asked. I tried to smile, but it hurt. "Like I've been hit by a truck," I joked weakly. He offered a strained smile, but said nothing. The nurses were kind, always checking in, offering comforting words. But their eyes, full of pity, told a story they didn't voice. I knew I was badly hurt, but the extent of it was hidden beneath the bandages that wrapped my face. As days turned into a week, Michael's visits grew shorter, his excuses more frequent. "Work's crazy right now," he'd say, or "Mom needs my help with something." I understood, or at least I tried to, but the silence and the solitude in the hospital room were suffocating. The day came to remove the bandages. I sat in front of a mirror, my heart racing. The nurse, a kind woman named Lisa, offered me an encouraging smile. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Slowly, she unwrapped the bandages, revealing my reflection bit by bit. The face staring back at me was a stranger's, scarred, distorted, a stark contrast to the woman I used to be. I couldn't hold back the tears. Lisa put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "It's still early days. Healing takes time," she said softly. I barely heard her. My thoughts were consumed by fear. What would Michael think? What would everyone think? I was no longer the woman he married. Michael's next visit was the hardest. He walked in, his usual confident stride faltering as he saw my face. "Hey," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "It's bad, isn't it?" I asked, my voice trembling. Michael paused, struggling to find the right words. It's not that bad. You're still you." But the way he said it, the way he couldn't quite look at me, spoke volumes. I lay there, feeling a chasm growing between us. The man who had promised to carry me through life seemed lost, unsure of how to bridge the gap that my scars had created. He came out of the hospital room, and I overheard him on the phone. His words, meant to be private, cut through me like a knife. "I don't know, Mom. She became ugly. It's hard to look at her," he said, and there was something like disgust in his voice. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down my face. I felt betrayed, not by his words, but by the realization that his love had conditions I was no longer able to meet. I mourned for my lost beauty, for the love I thought was unconditional, and for the future that now seemed like a distant dream. Returning home was supposed to be a relief, a step towards normalcy. But as I crossed the threshold of the house that once symbolized love and warmth, I felt sick because of the suffocating atmosphere of hostility, hidden hints, and disgust. The first few days, Michael was quiet, almost tiptoeing around me. Our conversations were strained, filled with awkward silences. I tried to bridge the gap, to reach out to him, but it felt like talking to a wall. One evening, as I sat on the couch trying to read, Michael walked in. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. "How was your day?" I asked, hoping to start some kind of conversation. He shrugged, keeping his eyes fixed on the TV. "It was okay. Busy." I nodded, feeling a knot in my stomach. "I was thinking, maybe this weekend we could go out, just to get some fresh air." Michael hesitated, then said, "I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe you should rest more." His words stung. It wasn't about resting. It was about not wanting to be seen with me. I turned my attention back to my book, but the words blurred through my tears. It wasn't just Michael. Evelyn's visits were even more difficult. She would come in, her face twisted in a poorly disguised grimace as she looked at me. Her words were polite, but her eyes were cold. One day, she sat across from me, her gaze wandering everywhere but my face. "It's such a shame what happened," she said, a tinge of something like disgust in her voice. I clenched my fists, trying to maintain my composure. "Yes, it is," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Evelyn sighed, tapping her fingers on the table. "Well, we must all move on, right? Life doesn't stop." Her words, meant to be comforting, felt more like an attempt to avoid a difficult conversation. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then came the night that broke me. I woke up to the sound of Michael's voice. He was on the phone, his words slurred. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crept closer to the door. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. She's a different person, a monster. I don't even recognize her," he slurred, his voice heavy with drink. I stood there, frozen, as his words echoed in my head. I was the same person, wasn't I? But to him, I was a stranger, a monster, someone he no longer loved or desired. I returned to bed, but sleep eluded me. The darkness of the room felt suffocating, a physical embodiment of the loneliness that had enveloped my life. Lying there, I realized that the home I once cherished no longer existed. It was just a house now, a place where I lived but no longer belonged. The changes in our home were like a slow, creeping fog, gradually obscuring the warmth and love that once filled it. Michael began coming home late, the smell of alcohol clinging to him like a second skin. His eyes, once so full of affection, now often glinted with irritation and something darker. One night, he staggered in, his steps unsteady. I sat up, concerned. "Michael, you're home late. Is everything okay?" He sneered, his words slurred. "Oh, now you care? You spend all day hiding in this house, and now you pretend to care about me?" I flinched, stung by his words. "Michael, you're drunk. Let's talk about this in the morning." He laughed bitterly, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "What's there to talk about? Look at you. Look at us." I retreated to our room, tears stinging my eyes. The next day, I called Evelyn, hoping for some understanding, some support. "He's drinking a lot, coming home late, and he's mean," I told her, my voice breaking. Evelyn's response was curt, dismissive. "It's normal, dear. Men do these things. He's just stressed, that's all." Her words were like a cold splash of water. I realized then that I was alone in this, that my pain and my struggles were mine to bear. The worst night came without warning. I woke up to bright flashes of light. Blinking away sleep, I saw Michael standing over me with his phone, taking pictures. His face was twisted in a drunken smirk. "What are you doing?" I asked, confusion and fear mingling in my voice. He laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "I'm sending your photos to Hollywood. Maybe you can star in horror films now, no makeup needed." His words cut through me like a knife. I lay there, frozen, as he continued to snap pictures. Each click of the camera shudder a punctuation mark to my humiliation. After he left, I turned my face into the pillow, my body racked with sobs. The tears came in torrents, for the man I had lost, for the love that had turned to cruelty, and for the life that seemed to be slipping through my fingers. Humiliated by Michael's cruel remarks and feeling increasingly alienated, I started wearing a mask at home. It was a plain, white mask, hiding the scars that had become the focus of my existence. It was a small shield against the pain, a barrier between me and the world that had turned so cold. As I adjusted the mask one morning, looking at the blank face staring back at me in the mirror, my phone rang, cutting through the silence of the room. An unknown number flashed on the screen, and with a hesitant hand, I answered. "Hello, is this Mrs. Johnson?" The voice was unfamiliar, cautious yet sincere. "Yes, it's me. Who's this?" I replied, curiosity piqued. "My name is John. I was the father of the young man in your accident," he said, his voice laced with regret. A mix of emotions washed over me. "Oh, I see," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. John paused before continuing. "I can't express how sorry I am for what happened. My son was troubled, and what he did, it was unforgivable. I want to do something to help, to make amends." His words, unexpected and heavy with sorrow, left me momentarily speechless. "How can you help?" I asked, skepticism mingling with a faint spark of hope. "I'd like to meet and discuss it in person. Would that be okay?" John's request was earnest, almost pleading. After a moment of hesitation, I agreed to meet him. Sitting across from John in a cafe, his eyes filled with remorse, I listened as he spoke. "Karen, I want to offer financial support for any surgeries or treatments that might help you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. The offer was both overwhelming and tempting. I need to think about it," I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. I kept the meeting and the offer a secret from Michael and Evelyn. Their reactions, I feared, would only add to my confusion and pain. After days of internal debate, I decided to accept John's offer. I arranged consultations with plastic surgeons, discussing what could be done to help heal my scars. To Michael, I mentioned only that I was going for routine medical treatments. He didn't ask for details, and I didn't volunteer any, his indifference a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging inside me. On the day of the surgery, as I lay on the operating table, the mask was removed, and for a moment I faced my scars unflinchingly. Closing my eyes, I allowed myself to dream, to hope for a future where the woman in the mirror would be someone I recognized, someone whole. Weeks turned into months since the surgery, and with each passing day, my face healed, slowly returning to what it once was. But I kept this transformation hidden under my mask, a secret held close to my chest. Michael, lost in his own world, didn't seem to notice or care. The day I returned home from my final follow-up appointment, the mask firmly in place, I braced myself. Michael and Evelyn were there, their expressions clouded with disdain as I walked in. The air was thick with unspoken contempt, a familiar yet unwelcome presence in what used to be our home. Michael's eyes met mine briefly before he looked away, his lips curling into a sneer. "Look at you, hiding behind that mask. Can't even face the world," he muttered. I remained silent, the mask my armor against his words. Without warning, he thrust a stack of papers towards me. They fluttered to the ground, divorce papers, a stark symbol of our failed marriage. "I'm done with this farce," he spat out. "Sign these and let's end it." I felt a cold calm settle over me. Picking up the papers, I signed them without a word, my pen steady, my resolve firmer than ever. Evelyn, standing nearby, scoffed. "Good riddance. We don't need an ugly reminder of your failure in our lives." Her words, meant to wound, barely grazed me. I had grown beyond their reach. With a small smile playing on my lips, I reached up and removed my mask, revealing my face, almost as it was before the accident. The shock on Michael's and Evelyn's faces was a picture I'd remember forever. Michael's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her earlier poise crumbling. But how?" Michael stammered, taking a step towards me. I looked at him, my smile growing. "You were too busy wallowing in your own misery to notice me, to see the person you vowed to love in sickness and in health. Michael's face crumbled, his earlier bravado fading. Please, let's start over. We can forget all this happened. I laughed, not out of joy, but because of the absurdity of his words. Forget? No, Michael. I won't forget how you treated me, how you made me feel. I'm leaving, but not because you or your mother want me to. I'm leaving for me. I gathered my bag, my signed divorce papers in hand, and walked past them, out of the house that was no longer a home. Their shocked faces were the last image I took with me, a reminder of how far I had come and the new life that awaited me. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I moved into a small apartment, a space that was mine alone. It was here, among unpacked boxes and bare walls, that I began to rebuild my life. Returning to work at the fitness center was a big step. The familiar smell of the gym, the sound of weights clinking. It was comforting. My colleagues welcomed me back with open arms, their smiles genuine and warm. Hey Karen, you're back. We missed you around here, said Lisa, one of the trainers. I smiled, feeling a sense of belonging. It's good to be back. I've missed this place. As I resumed training sessions, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. With each class I taught, I grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally too. I was finding myself again, rediscovering the woman who loved her job, who took pride in her strength. One day, after a particularly grueling session, I sat down on a bench, catching my breath. That's when John walked in. I hadn't seen him since our meeting at the cafe months ago. Hello, he said, a tentative smile on his face. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. How are you? I stood up, surprised but pleased to see him. I'm doing well, thank you. It's good to see you, John. We talked for a while, about mundane things at first, the weather, the gym. Then, the conversation shifted to more personal topics. I never got the chance to thank you properly, I said, my voice sincere. Your help. It changed everything for me. John's smile was warm. I'm just glad I could do something to make amends. You've come a long way. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. I was wondering if maybe you'd like to grab a coffee sometime? No pressure, just as friends. The invitation caught me off guard, but it was a pleasant surprise. I'd like that, I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. As I watched him leave the gym, I felt a flutter of excitement, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was the beginning of something new, a chance to explore life from a fresh perspective. That night, as I lay in bed in my new apartment, I thought about the twists and turns my life had taken. There was still pain and healing ahead, but there was also hope. Hope for a future that was mine to shape. The dawn of a new day was breaking, and I was ready to meet it head on. The journey of life, I've come to realize, is never a straight path. It twists and turns, bringing challenges and surprises along the way. Since my divorce, I've been rediscovering who I am, but not without unexpected obstacles. Michael, unable to accept the end of our marriage, began reaching out, trying to rekindle what we once had. His persistence, a stark contrast to his earlier indifference, forced me to seek legal means to ensure my peace. It was a difficult decision, but necessary for my well-being. The day I stood in court, asking for a restraining order, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. Sadness for what our relationship had become, and determination to protect my newfound independence. Meanwhile, my relationship with John was blossoming into something beautiful and profound. He was a constant source of support and understanding. On one of our dates, as we walked along a riverbank under the stars, he turned to me and said something that stayed with me. You know, you were always beautiful, even with your scars. It's just that not everyone can look past the surface. Not everyone can see into the soul. I looked at him, touched by his words. Thank you, John. That means more to me than you can imagine. He smiled, his eyes reflecting the starlight. It's the truth, and I'm grateful for every part of you. That night, as I lay in bed, reflecting on everything that had happened, I felt a deep sense of contentment. My journey had been fraught with pain and heartache, but it had also led me to a place of self-acceptance and love. I realized then that the most profound form of love isn't about how we look or what we have. It's about being loved for our soul, for the essence of who we are. John saw me for me, scars and all, and cherished what he saw. Life had come full circle, but in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had lost a life I thought was perfect, only to find a deeper, more meaningful existence. I had learned to love myself and found someone who loved me for the person I had become. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength gained, and for the love that had found its way into my life. I had emerged from the shadows of my past, stepping into a future bright with promise and hope. My name is Eliza, and I thought I had it all figured out. At 30, I was married to the love of my life, Michael, and we lived in this cozy, though tiny apartment in one of the city's most sought-after areas. This place, with its quaint charm and memories, was a gift from my late grandmother. Michael and I were like two peas in a pod. He worked in finance, always dressed in those sharp suits that made him look so handsome. I worked in marketing, a job I loved for its creativity and pace. We were the perfect team, or so I thought. One lazy Sunday morning, as we were having breakfast, Michael brought up the topic of family, a conversation we had danced around for a while. "Eliza, I've been thinking," Michael began, his eyes serious, "about us, about starting a family." I felt a flutter in my heart. "Really? That's great. I've always dreamed of a big family," I replied, my voice filled with excitement. Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I want that too, but let's wait until we have a bigger place. This apartment is too small for a family." I nodded, though a part of me felt a bit disappointed. "You're right. It makes sense. We should sell this place first, right?" "Exactly," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Once we sell your grandmother's apartment, we can buy a house big enough for, say, 3 or 4 kids?" I laughed. 4 kids? That's a mini army." The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, but I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. It was like a small cloud on a sunny day. Family gatherings were a big thing in Michael's family. His parents, Robert and Martha, were the warmest people you'd ever meet. They welcomed me into their family with open arms. Then there was Alex, Michael's younger brother, who was married to Sarah. They had 2 adorable kids, but Sarah and I never clicked. She was always a bit cold and distant, and sometimes downright rude. During one such family gathering at Michael's parents' house, she made a snide remark about my cooking. "Eliza, maybe you should stick to marketing and leave the cooking to us homemakers," she said, a fake smile plastered on her face. I remember feeling my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Michael jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. "Hey, I love Eliza's cooking, right, Dad?" he said, looking at his father, who nodded in agreement. The evening passed with more awkward moments, but I tried to brush them off. I loved Michael, and I was determined to make things work, even with Sarah. As we lay in bed that night, I turned to Michael. "Do you think Sarah doesn't like me?" Michael, already half asleep, murmured, "Don't worry about her. You're amazing, and that's all that matters." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But deep down, I knew that things were not as perfect as they seemed. And little did I know, my world was about to turn upside down. A few weeks had passed since that conversation with Michael about starting a family. The idea of waiting for a bigger home had settled in my mind, though I still held on to the dream of a large family. It was a chilly December morning, and I was tidying up the apartment while Michael was at work. I decided to clean out the coat closet. It was overflowing with jackets and coats we hardly wore. As I was going through Michael's coats, I felt something in the pocket of his winter jacket. Curious, I pulled it out. It was a receipt. At first, I thought it was just another receipt for coffee or something mundane, but this was different. It was a receipt for a scarlet-colored designer bag from a high-end store known for its romantic gifts. My heart skipped a beat. Could this be for me? I wondered aloud, a smile spreading across my face. Michael had never been the type to splurge on extravagant gifts, but maybe this was his way of showing his love, especially with Christmas just around the corner. That evening, when Michael came home, I decided not to mention the receipt. I wanted to act surprised when he gave me the gift. We sat down for dinner, and I couldn't help but feel a bit giddy. "Michael, what are we doing for Christmas?" I asked casually. He looked up from his plate. "Oh, the usual. Dinner at my parents'. Why, you got something special in mind?" I shook my head. No, just the usual sounds perfect. The days leading up to Christmas were busy with work and preparations for the holidays. But that receipt stayed in the back of my mind. I imagined how that scarlet bag would look with my New Year's outfit. Finally, it was Christmas Eve. We were at Michael's parents' house, the whole family buzzing with festive cheer. Presents were piled under the tree, and I kept sneaking glances at them, trying to spot a bag-shaped gift. "Eliza, can you help me with the dessert?" Martha, Michael's mom, called out from the kitchen. "Of course, Martha. Be right there," I replied, happy to lend a hand. As I helped her with the pie, I mentioned the gift. "Michael's been acting a bit secretive. I think he's planning a surprise for me." Martha smiled. "That boy always has something up his sleeve. You're good for him, Eliza." The time came to open the gifts. My heart raced as Michael handed me a medium-sized, neatly wrapped box. It didn't feel like a bag, but maybe. I tore open the wrapping paper to find a set of beautiful porcelain dishes. I looked up at Michael, confused. "Surprise! I know you've been wanting a new set for when we host dinners," he said, smiling. I forced a smile. "They're lovely, Michael. Thank you." But inside, I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. Where was the scarlet bag? Why did he buy it if not for me? The Christmas dinner at Michael's parents' house was in full swing. The house was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warm glow of holiday lights. I tried my best to push the thoughts of the scarlet bag out of my mind and focus on the festivities. "Eliza, could you pass the gravy?" Alex, Michael's brother, asked from across the table. "Sure, here you go," I replied, passing the gravy boat down the table. Michael's parents were beaming, happy to have their family around them. His mother, Martha, always went all out for Christmas, and this year was no exception. The dinner was delicious, and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. After dinner, we all moved to the living room for the gift exchange. I watched as Michael's nieces tore open their presents with glee, their faces lighting up with each new toy they uncovered. It wasn't until we were getting ready to leave that I noticed something that made my heart stop. There, slung over Sarah's shoulder, was a striking scarlet-colored designer handbag. It was unmistakable, the very same bag from the receipt I had found in Michael's coat. My mind raced as we said our goodbyes. I couldn't take my eyes off that bag. It was more than just a purse. It was a symbol of something hidden, something unspoken. On the drive home, the car was filled with an uneasy silence. Michael seemed oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. As the city lights passed by, my mind replayed the evening, but this time I saw it through a different lens. I remembered the fleeting glances that Michael and Sarah had exchanged throughout the night. They were subtle, almost imperceptible, but now they seemed glaringly obvious. The way their eyes met across the room, the brief smiles, the quick, hushed conversations when they thought no one was looking. "Is everything okay, Eliza? You've been awfully quiet." Michael's voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to look at him, 1,000 questions on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to voice any of them, not yet. "I'm just a bit tired, that's all," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. The rest of the drive home was spent in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal creeping in. The man I loved, the life we had built together, suddenly everything seemed like a fragile facade, ready to crumble at any moment. In the days that followed Christmas, my mind was in turmoil, haunted by the sight of Sarah with that scarlet designer handbag and the subtle glances exchanged between her and my husband, Michael. The nagging feeling in my gut told me something wasn't right. One cold evening, as Michael sat idly flipping through TV channels, I decided to confront him. "Michael, can we talk? It's about the bag," I said, my voice betraying a hint of nervousness. He looked at me with a casual expression. "What about it? I just helped Alex pick out a surprise for her, that's all." I took a deep breath. I found the receipt, Michael. It was in your coat. Why didn't you tell me? He let out a small laugh, trying to wave it off. Oh, that. It was just a favor for Alex. You're thinking too much into it, Eliza. His response did little to soothe my suspicions. Later that night, as Michael lay asleep, I mustered up the courage to look through his phone. My heart pounded as I scrolled through his messages and stumbled upon a thread that would change everything. The conversation between Michael and Sarah was not just flirty. It was intimate, revealing a deep and long-standing affair. But the true shock came when I read a message where they discussed the biggest secret of all. Alex's children were actually Michael's. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. My husband had been in a relationship with his brother's wife, and the children I'd come to adore as my nephews were in fact my stepchildren. I felt sick to my stomach as I read message after message. They spoke of love, of a future together, and, most shockingly, of convincing me to sell the apartment and move the money to a joint account. Tears streamed down my face as the magnitude of the betrayal sank in. I was quick to screenshot the messages, sending them to my email for safekeeping. With a heavy heart, I deleted any trace of my actions from his phone and lay back, my mind spinning with the enormity of the deception. The next morning, I played the part of the unsuspecting wife. Over breakfast, Michael brought up selling our apartment, a conversation we'd had previously. So, what do you think about the sale? It could be a good move for us. I nodded, my mind racing with plans of my own. Yes, let's sell it. It's time for a new beginning, I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos within. He smiled, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. That's my girl, always so decisive. Little did he know, I was thinking about my future, but it was a future that was starting to look very different from the one we had planned together. Armed with the bitter truth about Michael's affair and the shock of his betrayal, I knew I needed to act smartly and swiftly. I put on a mask of normalcy in front of Michael while planning my next steps. A few days later, I made an appointment with a lawyer, Mrs. Jenkins, a recommendation from a close friend. Sitting in her office, I felt a mix of nervousness and determination. Mrs. Jenkins, I have proof of my husband's infidelity, and it's not just any affair. He's been involved with his brother's wife, and their children are actually his, I explained, my voice trembling slightly. Mrs. Jenkins listened intently, her expression serious. I'm sorry you're going through this, Eliza. Let's go over the evidence you have. We need to plan your next steps carefully. I showed her the screenshots of the messages between Michael and Sarah. She took notes, nodding her head thoughtfully. This is quite damning evidence. We can use this in your favor, especially in terms of the financial settlement, Mrs. Jenkins said. However, I advise discretion until we have everything in place. Are you prepared to go through with a divorce? Yes, I am. I can't be with someone who's betrayed me like this, I replied, a sense of resolve building within me. Mrs. Jenkins outlined a plan. First, we'd secure my financial assets, especially the money from the apartment sale. Then, we'd proceed with filing for divorce, using the evidence to negotiate a favorable settlement. As I left her office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. There was a long road ahead, but I was ready to take it. Back at home, I continued to act as if everything was normal. Michael, oblivious to my discovery and the impending storm, was focused on the apartment sale. So, I talked to a real estate agent today. He said we could get a good price for the apartment, Michael said one evening over dinner. That's great news, I replied, keeping my emotions in check. Do you think it's a good time to put it on the market? Absolutely. The sooner we sell, the sooner we can start looking for a new place, he said, unaware of the irony in his words. As the days passed, I worked closely with Mrs. Jenkins, preparing all the necessary documents and securing my financial position. Every conversation with Michael, every smile, was a performance. But it was a performance I needed to maintain a little longer until everything was ready. The day we listed the apartment for sale, Michael was ecstatic. This is it, Eliza, our new beginning. Little did he know, it was indeed the beginning of something new, but not the future he envisioned. My heart ached with the pain of betrayal, but I was determined to come out of this stronger. The plot I was weaving wasn't just for retribution, it was for my independence and a fresh start. As the new year approached, The plans I had been carefully laying with Mrs. Jenkins were coming together. My facade of normalcy with Michael remained intact, even as my heart grew heavier each day. The final act of my plan was set to unfold during the New Year's Eve party at Michael's parents' house. It was there that I would reveal everything. The evening of the party arrived, and the house was buzzing with the usual festive cheer. Michael's parents had outdone themselves with decorations, and the air was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. I mingled with the family, all the while feeling like I was in the eye of a storm. Michael was in high spirits, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "Eliza, you seem a bit quiet tonight. Everything okay?" Michael asked, as we found a moment alone in the kitchen. "Just thinking about the new year and all the changes it'll bring," I said, my voice steady. He smiled and wrapped his arm around me. "It's going to be our best year yet." If only he knew. As midnight approached, everyone gathered around with glasses in hand, ready to count down to the new year. I took a deep breath, knowing that my moment was near. As the clock struck 12 and everyone cheered, I turned to Michael. "Before we celebrate too much, I have a special gift for you," I said, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I handed him a small, neatly wrapped box. The room quieted as all eyes turned to us. Michael, looking surprised, unwrapped the box. Inside were the divorce papers and a printout of the messages I had found on his phone. His face drained of color as he realized what they were. "What is this, Eliza?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "It's over, Michael. I know about you and Sarah. I know about everything," I said, my voice clear and strong. The room erupted into chaos. Michael's parents looked shocked, his brother Alex was speechless, and Sarah, who had been standing near the back, looked like she might faint. "What are you talking about, Eliza?" Michael's mother asked, confusion and concern in her voice. "Michael has been having an affair with Sarah, and her children are his," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Michael tried to speak, but no words came out. Sarah started crying, and Alex, who had been silent up until now, turned to his brother. "Is this true, Michael? Tell me this isn't true." Alex's voice was filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. Michael couldn't meet his brother's eyes. The truth was out there for everyone to see, and there was no escaping it. The revelation at the New Year's Eve party sent shockwaves through the room. Michael's family, once a picture of unity and joy, was now a scene of chaos and disbelief. The truth about Michael's affair with Sarah and their plan to embezzle the money from my apartment sale was out, and the reactions were immediate and intense. Michael's mother, Martha, looked at him with a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. "Michael, how could you? And with Sarah? To think you were planning to steal from Eliza and run away?" Before Michael could respond, I added, "And it's not just the affair. They were planning to use the money from the sale of my apartment to leave the country." The room went silent. The gravity of the betrayal hung heavy in the air. Then, Martha, overcome with emotion, fainted, causing a stir as family members rushed to her side. Michael stood there, looking lost and defeated. His father, Robert, shook his head in disgust. "I can't believe you would do this to your own family, to your own brother." Alex, who had been silent, his face a mask of shock and hurt, finally spoke. "Michael, I don't even know who you are anymore." Sarah was sobbing uncontrollably, her tears doing little to garner any sympathy. The family was too stunned and hurt by the depth of their deceit. With Martha being attended to and the room in disarray, I knew this was my moment to make my stand. I raised my voice, ensuring everyone heard me clearly. "I am filing for divorce from Michael, and I won't just stop there. I will be seeking financial compensation for this betrayal from both Michael and Sarah." The words felt empowering to say out loud. It was a declaration of my independence and my refusal to be a victim of their selfishness. Michael tried to approach me, a look of desperation in his eyes. "Eliza, please, let me explain." I held up my hand to stop him. "There's nothing you can say to justify what you've done. You and Sarah have made your choices. Now, you'll have to live with the consequences." The months following the New Year's Eve revelation were a whirlwind. The divorce proceedings were tough, but with each passing day, I felt a sense of liberation growing within me. I was no longer bound to a relationship built on lies and deceit. One sunny afternoon, after finalizing the last of the divorce papers, I sat in a cafe, a cup of coffee in hand, reflecting on the journey I had been through. "You look like you're a million miles away," my friend Clara said as she joined me at the table. "Just thinking about everything that's happened," I replied, offering a small smile. "You've handled it all with such grace, Eliza. I'm proud of you," she said, her eyes full of genuine sympathy. "Thanks, Clara. It wasn't easy, but I feel like I can finally start fresh now," I said, feeling the weight of the past months lift off my shoulders. With the divorce settled, I had kept the apartment and received a significant financial settlement from Michael. As for him, his reputation had taken a severe hit, and he lost his job due to the scandal. Sarah and Alex had also gone their separate ways, with the family ties deeply strained. "I heard Michael moved out of the city," Clara mentioned, stirring her coffee. "Yes, he did. And honestly, I'm relieved. It's easier to move on knowing he's not around," I admitted. "And what's next for Eliza?" Clara asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. I thought for a moment. "I want to focus on myself for a while. Maybe travel, pick up some hobbies that I've been neglecting, and who knows, perhaps even start dating again when I'm ready." "That sounds wonderful. You deserve all the happiness in the world," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. As we chatted and laughed, I felt a sense of hope for the future. The pain of the past was still there, a faint scar on my heart, but it no longer defined me. I had emerged stronger and more self-assured. The story of my marriage and its dramatic end would always be a part of me, but it was now just that, a part of my past. Ahead of me lay a path filled with new possibilities and opportunities for growth and happiness. It was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of something new, something entirely my own. A fresh start, a new beginning, and a life that I was ready to embrace fully.